How we sounded. Wish I had my mic here, but this is more of an impromptu stream. So yeah. This is, by the way, Schlatt and Ludwig's Music Emporium.
I'm going to restart the stream, really, so we can get some new people in.
Banger, right? Let me zoom this bad boy in for you. Bullying tactics. Inviting someone on for a debate while they're defending a genocide. If that's bullying, man, I mean, damn. My bad. Can you guys see this okay, by the way? I just want to make sure you can see this.
That's bullying, man. I mean, damn.
Welcome to the stream. All right, we're going to get started right now, I think. So, here's the genesis. Basically, this guy, this timer rhyme, essentially, I don't know if he's a U of M student or not, but he started saying some pretty crazy things about the widely accepted, I would say, genocide in Palestine. So we're going to go through them one by one, I think, and then debunk them, because that's what I want to do. Yeah, first let me get rid of some of this stuff so that it is not lagging my computer. Excellent. Looks like I'm lagging a lot. Whatever. As long as, can you guys hear me? I see we have 4 viewers in chat. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to go through this guy and debunk him. So yeah, here it is. Starting with this right here, down at the bottom. Yeah, so we got 5 viewers in chat. I think we're going to get started. Hopefully we don't lag too much. We'll see. There we go. So this is what I said. There's some article about resistance at U of M. I'm pretty sure they were talking about pro-Palestinian resistance. Let's put on those glasses so I can feel extra smart. Let's do it. There we go. I'm feeling very good now. Okay. Basically, there was this article at U of M specifically talking about resistance. And in regards to the resistance, there was basically sort of notifications about, you know, protesters and how they were going to get things from the university about disciplinary action. This is what I said. I said, we need to be smart, we need to be cunning, and we need to make this tent as big as possible For good faith actors, even those who are naive and perhaps disagreeable in nature, it will take all of us to end the worst genocide since Rwanda, arguably longer. And by that, I'm, of course, alluding to some of the earlier genocides in the 20th century, including the Holocaust. I don't know if it'll top that. I really have no interest in discovering that. I'm not a genocide scholar. And at the end of the day, two genocides, one being worse than the other, doesn't make the other one less of a genocide. So at that point, I don't think it matters. So anyways, of course, by the way, if you're in stream right now, I will take live questions from you live. It can be, nice questions about who I am, or it can be about this subject. It doesn't have to be necessarily hostile. It doesn't have to be academic in nature. The one thing that I really prioritize on this, Great Lakes Unfiltered being my channel and my news outlet, is that I try to have 100% free speech wherever possible. So anyways, I'm going to keep an eye on chat while we do this. So I said that, and then I was like, please join our Discord. And that's our Discord for UMich students. Only UMich students can currently get in it, but if you're there, don't worry about it. So this is what this guy says. Let me zoom in, actually. So he says, there is no genocide. There's a war to eliminate Hamas, who have buried under hundreds of miles of military tunnels under civilian structures, and who do absolutely nothing to protect Gazan civilians and instead actively danger them. So let's go through this one first. First and foremost, let me look this up. Gaza genocide. Let's see what happens there. So there's this thing called a Wikipedia article, and Wikipedia, by the way, is not an accurate source itself. The reason why I like Wikipedia is not because Wikipedia is the Bible for all accurate information. The reason why I like Wikipedia is specifically because Wikipedia is a great aggregator of sources. Treat it like an academic, library base. Obviously, sometimes things are not accurate, which is why you got to double check them. But more often than not, in terms of Wikipedia, the way it works is they hold their editors to a very high standard of seniority. So anyone can edit Wikipedia. That's what the downside is. People are like, oh, anybody can edit Wikipedia. It's totally fake. That's not how it works. Yes, anyone can edit Wikipedia. However, people are specifically designated to cover topics, whether it's politics, whether it's academics, whether it's health, things like that. And what happens is there's head editors above that, and there's editors who are even higher than that. And they check these pages. And that's why even when people change stuff to be funny about like people's nicknames and whatnot on Wikipedia, the way it works is that Wikipedia is often self-correcting. It is not 100% correct, of course. But these senior editors who earn their positions through literal community votes over periods of decades, like there are some editors who've been editing Wikipedia almost like since its inception, almost 30 years. And that's how it works. And if you actually go to most of these sources, if not all on this one, especially for controversial articles, they try to make sure it's accurate because it's very, very fluid. And obviously people are very angry about the situation, whether they're pro or anti-genocide or pro-war or whatever. They edit those articles, and that's why they try to keep these pages protected. So if you see this right here, that's a lock. What does that mean? Wikipedia protection protocol. Wow. Anyone can edit Wikipedia? Well, this says extended confirmed protection, previously known as whatever, blah, 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 restricts editing to users with extended confirmed user access level, administrators and bots. So you literally have to stay up for 30 days and have made at least 500 edits that have been accepted in Wikipedia. And not only that, but the edits you have to make to this article also can't be deprecated. And deprecated just means like people tell you to go F yourself. The whole point is that this shows you that Wikipedia has standards here. That's the whole point. If you don't believe me, I don't know what to tell you. This is literally the proof right here. And like I said, don't cite Wikipedia itself. Use it as a jumping point. Use it as the trampoline, That's all I'm saying. Anyways, let me move this bad boy down a little bit. There we go. Cool. So yeah, let's go back to our previous page. So our commenter said there is no genocide. Let's check what this page says. Gaza genocide, the ongoing, intentional, systematic destruction of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip carried out by Israel during the Gaza war. The genocidal acts include mass killings, starvations, infliction of serious bodily and mental harm, preventing births. Other acts include blockade, destroying civilian infrastructure, destroying healthcare facilities, killing healthcare workers and aid seekers, causing mass forced displacement, committing sexual violence, destroying educational, religious, and cultural sites. You notice how this says ongoing and intentional? It doesn't say is the controversial claim. You know how that says that? That means it's backed up with enough sources that it has been widely recognized as a credible genocide. What's this little link here? What does that mean? Wait, what is this? The UN? What the hell's the UN? I don't know what that means. Does that stand for unintentionally Netanyahu? Like, is this an Israel source that I can trust? So let's go there. I don't know what this link means. Oh, wait a minute. Israel's committed genocide in the Gaza Strip. The UN found that. Commission. So this says, in Geneva, I don't know if you know these things, there's these things called Geneva Conventions. I heard they're big. I heard a lot of people get invited to them. They're kind of a big deal. You know, if you get invited to a Geneva Convention, it's pretty good. So, yeah, there's this thing called genocide, and apparently Israel's doing it. So this is what it says. Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem. This literally said that there's genocide. And then the commission literally urges Israel and all states to fulfill their legal obligations under international law to end the genocide and punish those responsible for it. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the UN is the independent body that is literally designed up of every single mass recognized state on the planet. All the countries, for the most part. And all the big ones. I think there's some other countries in there called like Russia and China, and I think there's some other ones like India. I've heard of those. I don't know if you guys have heard of those countries. I hear they're pretty big. They have like 1 billion people. So yeah, there's those countries in this thing called the UN. And apparently they say that Israel's doing genocide. And I don't know, man. I don't think the UN is Hamas, but it could be. I mean, you never know, right? I do all my opinions based off fear instead of facts, and that's how I became the way I am. No, but seriously, this is what it says. Commission has been investigating the events since October 7th for the last 2 years, concluded that Israeli authorities and the Israeli security forces committed 4 of the 5 genocidal acts defined literally after the Holocaust in the 1948 Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide, namely killing, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of the Palestinians in whole or part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births. I don't know, that sounds like Hamas in my opinion, doesn't it? That kind of sounds like Hamas. Like, why would, what is a Geneva Convention? That just sounds made up. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means, man. Geneva. Like, that doesn't even sound like a real place. I'm going to look this up on my phone. Is Geneva a real place? Have you guys heard of this? No one's talking in chat right now. I need to know. Has anyone heard of the Geneva Conventions? I really don't know what that means. So, yeah. I am going to... Oh, turns out Geneva is a real place. I think it's in Switzerland? So, yeah, there's this thing called Geneva Convention. And there's been multiple of them, and basically the idea is, hey, stop killing innocent people and mutilating children, and also doing chemical warfare and destroying people and literally wiping them out based on their race or unchangeable traits. In all seriousness, it's insane, the point that this man was trying to make. So he said there's no genocide. There's a war to eliminate Hamas. I guess technically this is true, if you take it at face value. A genocide would imply that every member of Hamas who is, I guess, assumed to be Palestinian would also be killed. So technically that's true. But, I mean, he's not wrong about this. It's just that a genocide can also do that. I'm telling this guy who's been chatting, F it, we'll do it live, Bill O'Reilly style.
Bill O'Reilly style.
Anyways, let's keep going. So there's a war to eliminate Hamas. I agree that there is a war to eliminate Hamas. It just also happens to be a genocide. Who built hundreds of miles of military tunnels under civilian structures? Let's check that one. Did Hamas build hundreds of miles of military tunnels under civilian structures? Oh my goodness. This one's true. There are tunnels. So wait, this guy, everything he said is right, right? Wait a minute. Can you kill civilians if there are tunnels under their buildings? Let me look that up. Oh, damn it. Doesn't tell me. Can we kill civilians? Ooh. International Red Cross. Let's check that one out. Let's find this one. Let's find this bad boy. Interesting. Huh. Interesting. So wait, they said indiscriminate attacks. Some other stuff. Military objectives are attacked. Civilians and civilian objects must be spared incidental or collateral damage to the maximum extent possible. So wait, let's check and see if Israel did that, right? So we agree that there are tunnels, apparently. And he said there's no genocide, which is also false. So this is false. This is true, to an extent. And apparently this is also true. So let's see if Israel is allowed to kill civilians. Okay. Huh. So they said that they had to do the maximum extent possible to spare civilians from incidental or collateral damage. So the Red Cross, that's what they said. And then this is what the UN said for human rights. The Commission also finds that Israel has failed to prevent and punish the commission of genocide through failure to investigate genocidal acts and prosecute alleged perpetrators. So I guess it sounds like that they're not doing the prevention of civilian casualties to the maximum extent possible. I don't know, though. I mean, I don't know. The UN, I thought, was Hamas. So let's keep reading, actually. So the commission apparently examined Israeli military operations in Gaza, including killing and severely harming unprecedented numbers of Palestinians. I mean, I guess technically that's maximum. It's just the wrong kind of maximum. It's maximum casualties, I guess. Imposing a total siege, including the blocking of humanitarian aid leading to starvation intentionally. Systemically destroying the healthcare and education systems in Gaza, committing systemic acts of sexual and gender-based violence, directly targeting children, carrying out systemic and widespread attacks on religious and cultural sites, disregarding the orders of the IOC, the International Court of Justice. I don't think that's maximum. I don't think that's maximum, guys. What do you think? Let's do a poll in chat. Do you guys think that's the maximum amount of sparing people from genocide? Like, what do you think? I'm gonna vote. No. Sweet. Yeah, so I think I'm going to put a poll in chat, I think, if I can do that, if I can figure that out. Also, hit the like button if you're not an insane person and you also do not like violence against innocent people. Crazy. Hot take, I guess. My God, YouTube chat sucks, bro. Anyways, I don't know how to do it, but it's fun. So yeah, this sounds like that even though apparently it is true that Hamas did this, and I guess technically that would endanger civilians, although it's not 100% in these articles. This says that all this bad stuff, like starving people intentionally, not giving them aid, medicine, people who've died from famine, people who've died from thirst, people who've died from lack of healthcare access, people who've died from curable diseases that they haven't been able to cure. Seems like, oh yeah, don't forget about bullets to the head, like the many children who were found with bullets in their skulls in the Gaza Strip. Let's see this one. It looks like that is not allowed. So the verdict on this first comment, this is just the first comment. We got plenty more to go, don't you worry. There is no genocide. There's a war to eliminate Hamas. So this claim is false based on the UN, apparently, and also numerous other international sources. You're wrong. You're denying genocide. You're no different than, certain 1930s type of German. There's a war to eliminate Hamas. This part is technically true, but it's also to kill everybody or displace everybody in the Gaza Strip, who built hundreds of military tunnels. That's also true, but this also leaves out the context that killing civilians in the manner described by the UN is not true. So I think I systematically debunked your first comment. And if the UN is Hamas, well, we got bigger problems. I don't know what to tell you at that point. At that point, you're just like too far gone. The only thing I could do to persuade you is something that's not even allowed on YouTube, which would be showing you the actual carnage of the thousands of people who've been murdered. But I'm not going to do that because it's against YouTube terms of service. But you can find those yourself. Let's go to his second comment, actually. He's been chirping a lot more. Of course, this guy doesn't also refer to his own, real name. So here we go. See his second claim. So he says, when I said I may just be guessing here, but it seems like you actually aren't interested in ending the mass slaughter and starvation of civilians. Instead are just hypocrisy baiting. If your care is genuine, though, please show it. I don't care about ideological debates on which political philosophy is the best. I just want the killing of kids, 83% by the way, of the civilian rate, which was recognized by the IDF's own internal data, to stop. That's what I said. So where did these numbers come from? So let's see what this guy said. That 83% is a preposterous lie. 83%. Okay, let's look this one up, actually. 83% civilian death rate in Gaza. Let's see. Comes from The Guardian. Interesting. So this article is actually from August, so a month ago. It's titled, Revealed Israeli military's own data indicates civilian death rate of 83% in Gaza war. So wait a minute. You said it's a preposterous lie. For one, a lie implies that I'm knowingly giving you a falsehood, which I'm not. So at worst, I guess it's just a miscommunication. And preposterous? I mean, this doesn't look preposterous to me. Let's keep reading. So anyways, you continue. Figures from a classified Israeli military intelligence database indicate 5 out of 6 Palestinians have been civilians. So wait a minute. Israeli military intelligence database. It's a lie? But it's reported in The Guardian, which is cited as a reputable news outlet that has gotten, as far as I've seen, very little, if nothing at all, wrong without correction in their history. So wait a minute, let's find out where this is from. It says a joint investigation by The Guardian and the Israeli-Palestinian publication 972 Magazine has found it. So wait, 972 Magazine, local call, apparently they said this was 8,000 military members, 53,000 civilians. By the way, we'll get into this later, but that 53,000 is a way big undercount because Israel doesn't let journalists in to actually investigate the mass graves that are getting uncovered every day. So apparently, we have 53,000 Palestinians right here that are killed by Israeli attacks and 8,900 fighters. So Yeah, 83% of the dead were civilians, or I guess we can't prove that all these children over here didn't have guns, you know, because then a child with a gun, of course, you have to kill him, right? That's what Israel thinks, apparently. So yeah. Also, this is apparently higher than many other wars, some others that have also been called genocides, which is interesting. Apparently, this is what the the Uppsala Conflict Data Program, which tracks civilian casualties worldwide. The proportion of civilians among those killed would be unusually high, particularly as it has been going on for such a long time. Typically, you don't have accidents happen that frequently when you're literally killing tens of thousands of people, including children, many children, which, by the way, half the population in the Gaza Strip before the genocide started was children. So, if you single out a particular city in battle in another conflict, you could find similar rates, but very rarely overall. Interesting. So here's conflicts. Afghanistan, 8% civilians, 4% combatants. Ukraine, 10%, 11%. Syria, 29% civilians. That's looking pretty genocidal. Wait, Sudan is about almost 50-50, but obviously it's insanely bloody either way. Bosnia, wait a minute. Bosnia? Hold up. 1 second. Bosnian genocide. Wait a minute. The Bosnian genocide took place during the Bosnian War in 1992. Wait a minute. Hold up. Time out. I'm throwing a flag in the play. 1992 to 1995. That says... Wait a minute. 1992, 1995. Could this be, this war, this conflict, also be a genocide? Wait a minute. Hold up. Time out. War, genocide. War, genocide. Conflict, Bosnia. Conflict, Bosnia. Seems like wars can also become genocides. Isn't that weird? Let me see what Bosnia did. The events in, I can't pronounce that, Srebrenica in 1995 included the killing of more than 8,000 men and boys, as well as the mass expulsion of another 25,000 to 30,000 civilians. Wait a minute. 30,000 civilians. 53,000 Palestinians killed. This is a genocide. But this guy thinks this isn't a genocide? Hold up. Okay, let's keep going. Aleppo, and then Gaza right in the middle. The only ones that have a worse rate so far is Rwanda, which is almost 100% a genocide. So I guess Gaza is not quite as bad as Rwanda. You know, you have that going for it, but apparently this is a genocide right here. People have also accused war crimes of people in Sudan and Syria, including, what's his name, Bashar al-Assad. So wait, this is a genocide. This is a genocide. Right in the middle, we got Gaza. And that's a whole strip. And this is 3 years. The only things that are worse are other recognized genocides, it looks like. That's weird. So wait, what was this guy saying again? 83% is a preposterous lie. Chat, let's take a poll. Is the 83% that 83% of people killed in the Gaza Strip we know are civilians, it seems like, based on Israel's own estimates? Is that a lie? It seems. I don't know. I feel like I'm not lying here, but, you know, maybe you can gaslight me enough. Honestly, let's keep going in this article. So, yeah, that's what it said. The Israeli military itself, the Israeli military, did not dispute the existence of the database or dispute the data on Hamas when they were asked by reporters. They did not dispute, let me repeat that. The Israeli military did not dispute the existence of this database or the data that said 83% of those killed in the Gaza Strip are civilians. The Israeli military said this. The IDF, Israeli Defense Force, also known as the occupying force by, you know, derisively by critics. So what did you say again? Hold up. 83% is a preposterous lie. Okay, wait a minute. But Tyler, hold up, Tyler. There is more later on here. IDF has identified the name of 70% of civilian casualties as the known militia. That's not the total number of militia that have been killed, which is 25,000. Ah, got it. So your argument is that this 83% number of civilians, which the Israeli military has not disputed, is apparently not accurate because you don't know all the data. So you're telling me I got to believe you because, trust me, bro. You're telling me I have to believe you over the Israeli military, over The Guardian, over 972 Magazine, over Local Call, over the UN. They asked about this. A spokesperson did not immediately respond from the IDF when asked why the military had given different responses to questions about a single set of data, the exact same data. So apparently, in Israel, they said it exists and these numbers are accurate, or at least they're not inaccurate, which is the same thing, I guess. And then they gave a different response to Americans, apparently. And they also haven't released the data, even though they haven't disputed it. The military itself, the IDF military, considers the Gaza Health Ministry toll reliable, which I would argue it isn't because it's an undercount. But they themselves say that this 52,000 number is accurate. So they're saying 52,900, and this is a month ago. It's much more now, obviously. And this is 50,000, which was an undercount by a lot. And now we're in the 60,000 range, which is also an undercount by a lot. And they said this is the people who are dead out of the fighters. And you have literally more people dead overall than total number of Palestinians considered active in the military. You're telling me that this is done and dead. Like, I'm wrong. This is a preposterous lie. The only thing I haven't debunked in this comment yet, which obviously you're an insane person if you believe this content, is the 25,000. I don't know where he gets that from. Let's find out. I genuinely don't. I didn't pre-watch this. IDF says 25,000 Hamas fighters killed. Let's find out where that says. Interesting. Ministry reported more than 25,000 Palestinians. Nope. Nothing. This is all civilian stuff. Military. So the IDF said this. Let's find out. Apparently. Oh, this isn't even who they've killed yet. This is the total number of militants. Okay, got it. So this sentence is written poorly. I'm gonna do some English dunking on this guy. Your sentence is written like crap. So I think what you meant to say is that is not the total number of militia. Semicolon, or new sentence. They have killed, or whatever, maybe after they have killed. That is not the total number of militia they have killed, period. New sentence. The total number of militia is estimated to be around 25,000. You don't have any punctuation here. I don't know if English is your first language or not, but no punctuation means this is a different thing. What I thought you meant is the total number of militia they have killed is 25,000. But what you meant, it seems, is 25,000 is the total number of militia. And that's not from the data set of the total number of militia they have killed. So in addition to being wrong, you're also bad at writing sentences. So please, do better. Join college. Come to college with me. We'll do it. This is just the second comment. I could write a whole essay about this, but instead, let's keep going, I think. I'm going to do this until I'm bored. So as you can see, he's a bit of a yapper. So I think first comment was mostly inaccurate, and even the stuff that was true is lies by omission. And the second one, The first sentence is just insanity. The second sentence also kind of misunderstands what Israel's saying. And the third sentence is written like crap. So let's keep going. Total fatalities of Hamas. So I said this, and then he responded again. He said total fatalities per Hamas, 65,400. Natural deaths, infant mortality, 10,000. The number of deaths expected to occur without war. Errors and other data anomalies, 1,000. Total war-related deaths since October 7, 2023, 54,000. Less, killed by Hamas or internal rockets, gangs, 4,000. Adjusted war-related deaths, 50,000. Combatants killed by the IDF, 24,000 civilian fatalities. Civilian to combatant ratio, 1.39. Okay, I was about to say I have no idea where the hell any of this comes from, but let's find out who this guy is. Hopefully, he's not a Nazi. We'll find out, I guess. Times of Israel. Let me copy the whole thing, see if I can find this. This guy seems like a reputable gentleman. I would always trust a bald man. I would never, ever, ever think a bald man was lying to me. Why would a bald man ever lie? Why do men lie? I don't know. So anyways, let's keep going. Interesting. So wait a minute. This comes from Salo Eisenberg. Source credibility. Wait a minute. Source credibility. Are they saying this guy's wrong? Casualty figures from the conflict are highly contentious. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry has been criticized by groups like Honest Reporting and Henry Jackson Society for data manipulation, including quietly removing thousands of names from casualty lists. Conversely, the World Health Organization and other UN bodies have found the ministry's figures to be reliable in the past, though recent reporting issues have been acknowledged. Uncounted casualties. All estimates face the challenge of accurately counting the thousands of people who may be missing or buried under rubble. Guardian said 5-to-1 ratio. Action on Armed Violence said 2.8. Wait a minute. We got 3 different ratios here. And all of them, by the way, are civilians, more civilians killed than military, but whatever, we'll go there. Different organizations use different methods to count casualties, leading to varied outcomes. Studies published in The Lancet have used alternative statistical methods to estimate higher total death tolls and different demographic breakdowns. Wait a minute. What is this? The Lancet? What the hell does that mean? The Lancet, Gaza. Interesting. So the Lancet, wait, actually, let's go back a step. What is the Lancet? The Lancet, oh, this is AI, by the way. Apparently it could be lying. Let's go to their website, just in case. AI could be deceiving me. Wow. So apparently there's a bunch of different numbers here. So the Lancet says there's at least 59,000 deaths, bare minimum. Nature Study, 84,000 deaths. Interesting. 75,000 of them are apparently violent deaths. But wait a minute, I thought there were only 47,000 Hamas fighters. That would imply there's at least bare minimum 30,000 civilians killed. That's interesting. Interesting. 64,000 deaths. Wait a minute. The Lancet, this is from last year, said 186,000 deaths. What? Wait a minute. 186,000? What does that mean? 186,000 deaths? That doesn't seem right. They could be Hamas. I mean, it sounds like they're Hamas, in my opinion. Let me find that number. Where is that number in here? Interesting. Let's find this one. Right here. According to a letter published on a website of the British medical journal The Lancet, 186,000 or more deaths could be attributable to the conflict in Gaza. This is just attributable deaths. Attributable. And this is when it was 38,000 by the official health run industry, which, by the way, their medical system has collapsed, which is why the numbers are inaccurate, you idiot. If you don't have a hospital with centralized infrastructure to track deaths of people dying, and not only people dying, but identifying them as Palestinian citizens, obviously the numbers are going to be far inferior, especially the longer the conflict progresses. But hey, that's just using basic logic and reasoning. I'm sorry for doing that with a reactionary idiot like this guy, who's an idiot, and also is too cowardly to come on here and debate this live. But this doesn't make sense, because I thought Israel was good, right? Wait a minute. Is that rubble? This doesn't look like war. This looks like genocide. I don't know, man. Let's keep it going. So apparently this study was written by multiple researchers from multiple different universities, including the West Bank, including the United States of America, multiple countries in Europe, and a person from Israel. Israel National Institute for Health Policy and Health Services Research. Is he Hamas? Is he secretly Hamas? Huh. Interesting. So the co-authors write that they started from the principle that armed conflicts have indirect health implications beyond the direct harm from violence to arrive at the death toll of 186,000. And this is a conservative estimate. Conservative estimate. Undercount. The lowest count they could based on their data methodology. This is the amount of deaths they had. And they concluded 4 indirect deaths per 1 direct death. So that includes things like lack of infrastructure, like healthcare, lack of food, lack of water, curable diseases not being cured. You're an insulin person. You don't have your insulin. Guess what? You die. You're somebody like me who has chronic illnesses. Guess what? You die if you don't have your medicine. Blood clots. The list goes on. And that's not even including, obviously, the people who are directly murdered by sniper bullets, by tanks, by not enough warning to leave areas that did actually have military infrastructure. So yeah, apparently their estimate relied on a report from the Geneva Convention, and they said in areas where there's armed conflict, studies show there are between 3 and 15 times as many people die indirectly for every person who dies violently. So they didn't even say 15. Somewhere in 3 to 15 is the range. If they were under 3, this would literally not be within this, I don't know if they're using a quartile or percentile, but it would not be within this range of 3 to 15 times the number of nonviolent deaths. Apparently it's biased, and they said questionable methods. This is from the Geneva Declaration of Armed Violence and Development, 2008, that reviewed areas of armed conflict. Honestly, let's just go to the report. Screw it. We're going back. We're going back in time, guys. We're going back to 2008. Welcome to 2008. I'm 7 years old. Bush is still president. The stock market's crashing. We're going to 2008. We're doing it. Just put yourself in those shoes. One of your parents is unemployed. Your parents are getting divorced. They hate each other. Maybe that's just me. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. If you're watching this, parents, I'm sorry. It's kind of funny. Anyways, let's see this methodology. 174 pages. That sounds like a Hamas number. 174 pages sounds like a Hamas number. So let's go to 3 to 15. You see, 15 times. Ooh, we found something. What does this mean? Let's zoom in for you guys. I'm gonna move this bad boy over so you can read it. There we go. Anyways, so we found something here, guys. So this says, down here, ratio of people killed in war to those dying indirectly because of conflict explored in the chapter on indirect deaths. Studies show that there are between 3 and 15 times as many people die indirectly for every person who dies violently. In the most dramatic of cases, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, up to 400,000 excess deaths per year have been estimated. Obviously, if you know anything about the Congo, they've had beef with their neighbors. Some of their neighbors have more advanced military weapons. Obviously, they have a lack of healthcare infrastructure, not enough things for curable diseases, food, water, etc. That's why people, make the meme starving in Africa, because this is where a lot of the starvation happens in Africa. And obviously, they're in the news recently because Trump, quote unquote, settled a war. But in my opinion, I actually like Rwanda. I know they've obviously genocide in the past, not a fan of that. But I like the fact that they are developing. It's just they treat Congo like second-class citizens almost, and I'm not cool with that, I guess. But overall, this is what's been happening in the Congo for a long time in that region, right next to the Rwandan genocide, where they literally force people to go out into the desert to die. Also, consequently, this report's estimate of a global average of 200,000 indirect conflict deaths per year should be taken as a conservative figure. Conservative. That means the lowest reasonable figure. There are many more deaths that we will either never calculate or have not yet seen. And by the way, Israel, the Israeli government, has a military censor. The IDF does not allow journalists unaccompanied in the Strip legally. The IDF has also killed more journalists in this recent conflict than almost any other conflict in recorded human history. So if you really wanted to dispute these numbers, you would let in journalists to see that these numbers are wrong, which Israel does not do. God, I am in pain. I am in pain. Let's find their methodology if we can. Let's go to the conclusion or abstract if there is one. Interesting. Global Burden of Armed Violence Report. Where was this made? So this is Geneva, so I'm guessing it's UN-based. Let me see the citations at the end. Oh, these pages are not loaded. So yeah, this is the Secretariat of the Geneva Declaration of Armed Violence and Development. So literally, this is UN stuff, I believe. Doesn't say. UN ODC. Okay, yeah, this is UN. So this is from the UN, but also derived from how many sources? Literally, this is just illustrations alone. This is all the sources. They have 7 chapters of sources. They have a total, it looks like, of literally hundreds of sources. So you're telling me the UN is biased against Israel when it uses all these sources from around the world. Literally, I'm just going to keep scrolling until the sources are over. There you go. And this is just the illustrations too, in boxes. You're telling me this is wrong, while also not allowing in journalists, while also telling me that there is no genocide at all, which we've already disproven in this very video / live stream. You're telling me that there is no genocide and that these numbers, this is the accurate civilian to combatant ratio. Let's go back to this guy, because it looks like that's wrong. It looks like the Lancet is more reliable. That's what I would rely on. And by the way, that's from 2024 Lancet. Lancet's most recent study said the highest estimates are over 600,000, but we'll get into that later. You're telling me that this guy who literally writes for Times of Israel, which is not allowed on Wikipedia, by the way, as a source that is credible for the Gazan genocide / Hamas-Israel conflict of 2023 to 2025. You're telling me that this dude, who literally is in Israel, writing for a publication that is approved by the censors in Israel, which is often cited by Israel defenders, and which is questioned by the Lancet, the literal third most cited medical journal in the world, and most attributed medical journal in the entire world. You're telling me the Lancet is wrong in Hamas. You're telling me the UN is wrong in Hamas. You're telling me the Guardian is wrong in Hamas. You're telling me I'm wrong and I'm Hamas, and I should believe this one dude. That's what you're telling me. That's what you're making me do. By the way, if you're here somehow and you believe that Israel has a right to exist, Israel has a right to defend itself, I don't disagree with you at all. I would agree that Israel has a right to defend itself. I would agree that Israel has a right to exist. Israel's certainly existing right now, and I would argue they are not defending themselves. They are currently doing genocide in the Gaza Strip alongside antagonizing regional powers, along with some defensive forces, but it seems like they always first strike nations around there. I'm going to find this guy's article and read it, but it just seems like you're clueless. And if you really wanted to debate, we could debate live, but you don't want to do that for some reason. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird how you don't want to debate live after posting these sources? It seems like you are incapable of debate. You're not capable of critically thinking about these issues and also taking a position that isn't biased. By the way, for point of reference, if anybody's tuned in, I was not super, I don't know, pro-Palestine or whatever you want to call it. I don't even call it pro-Palestine. I call it pro-humanity. When 2023 happened, I will readily admit, I'll tell you this directly. October 7th, the day it happened, before that, all I knew about Israel-Palestine is that it was a taboo subject. I was just barely 21 years old, stressed out, and not interested in opening another can of worms, especially after the more protests raged. For that time, I was busy graduating college. That was my last semester of senior year of undergrad, although I'm in grad school now. So I was not interested. JB, I am trying. I invited him to debate multiple times. You still don't know dick about Israel and Palestine, which is not a country. JB, you want to debate instead of this guy? Because this guy's cowering. I'm a nice guy, by the way, JB. I'm not here to tell you that you're an idiot. I'm not here to tell you that you're a bad person. I grew up in America. I thought my country was always there to defend me. I grew up in a household that literally to this day is Republican. My grandma's a 3-time Trump voter, and I love her to death. She's a great person. My grandpa, 3-time Trump voter, great person. My dad, I think 2-time Trump voter. My brother, I believe he's voted third party, but also voted for Kamala. So, like, I am open to having you on if you want to come on the show, literally. I'm not here to tell you you're a bad person. That's not my role. My role is to show you what the facts say. And if you have facts somehow that disprove all of this, which will take longer than how long I've been streaming, I'd be more than happy to have you on stream right now. Go to my Instagram or go to my Reddit or whatever, and basically just hit me with the DM and I can link you my Discord or something, and we'll debate right now, live. I have no issue with that. Plus, I like talking to new people, even if I disagree with them. I've had people who are pro-Israel on the broadcast before. So we'll see. Anyways, Dome Roamer. I'm assuming that is a euphemism, and if it is, shout out to you. Subscribe if you like your dome being roamed. I'm sorry, that's not appropriate for this conversation. But anyways, yeah, JB, if you want to debate live, get on. We'll take live debates. I don't care. Come on my show. We'll debate live. If I don't know, what did you say? I don't know D word about Israel and Palestine, which is not a country. I'm assuming you mean Palestine. Although your sentence punctuation is not conclusive. It's not sure what country you're saying is not a country. And regardless, countries are all made up. Anything can be a country or not a country. It's all about de facto, control. Like technically, what is it called? Internationally, Crimea is not recognized as a part of Russia, but Russia's been in control of it for decades. So is it a part of Russia or is it a part of Ukraine? At this point, it's kind of both. It's internationally recognized as part of Ukraine, but then it's literally been controlled by Russia. And I would say, what do you think matters more to Ukraine? The fact that it's occupied by Russia or the fact that it's controlled? Or the fact that it's, what is it, international law recognized as part of Ukraine? Okay, no worries. JB, I'm genuinely down. I'm not going to shame you. I'm not that guy. The whole point of this channel is free speech and debate and discussion, and I will change my opinions if you prove me wrong. I'm totally fine with that. It's not like Steven Crowder where he goes, change my mind, and then he abuses his wife. I'm not that guy. Verbally abuses, for the record, so he can't sue me. Also, I don't have a wife yet. Or a husband. It's 2025. It's Pride Month. So yeah, I'd be happy to debate you some other time. In the meantime, if anyone else wants to debate, they're welcome to reach out to me on my Instagram. It's right there in the middle. Or we'll keep going. So anyways, I debunked this pretty well, I think. This guy is a writer for a outlet that literally cannot be cited as reliable by both Wikipedia and also academic journals in many cases because of its bias, and also crux under Israel is that it's censored by the Israeli military as censor. And Israel is constantly at war, it seems. So that is what is being said here. Let's actually go through his data before moving on to the next comment, because this is just third comment out of many out of this guy. So yeah, let me find his actual article from, I believe it was Times of Israel is what it said. Times of Israel. Let me find it. So I guess, is this from this year or last year? This looks like it's from this year. Okay. June 30th. Trying to get as close to new as possible, because it seems like people who want to move the goalposts whenever they're cornered in debate always go, wait, that's too far back. That's too far back. That's wrong. That's wrong. You're hurting my feelings with reality. Reality hurts my feelings. And so I'm trying to get as close to a modern data as possible. So this is Times of Israel. By the way, Times of Israel, before we go into this, is literally not credible per Wikipedia's editorial board, per many academic journals. My professors would probably not let me use Times of Israel when directly talking about the Israel-Palestine war and subsequent Gazan genocide. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. So let's read this article. So apparently, there was skepticism about these numbers in Gaza, and that is true. He's not wrong. It's just the skepticism that I've seen is in the other direction, it seems. It seems to be in the other direction. 186,000 dead. We don't actually know, by the way, because the same military censor that prevents Times of Israel from reporting the truth unfiltered, obviously said the title in the movie, Great Lakes Unfiltered. Hit that subscribe button. If you want actual information, I'm not here to sell you a party. Screw political parties. F them. F both parties in America. I think the Democrats are, slightly better, but F both of them. They're both corrupt. Subscribe. We do real news, real republishing of work that is credible, and we admit when we're wrong, which we haven't been wrong so far since we're new. So, anyways, I almost spilled water all over my computer. That would have been bad. I am going to keep looking at this. So the first major example came October 17th, 10 days after. 500 Gazans were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the hospital. Al-Ahi Hospital. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've liked the, by the way, this is not related at all, and this is probably a very bad time to mention this, but I have been really into pronouncing things with an accent recently. I don't know. Al-Ahi Hospital. I need more water in my mouth, I guess, to do it, but we'll see. Al-Ahi Hospital. Bombing. Let's find out. So I remember this. If you remember back when October 7th happened, this, honestly, I'll admit this myself, knowing very little at the time about the conflict, but following it as much as my self could emotionally tolerate, I thought guys like Hassan Piker were Hamas apologists. You're saying you're defending Hamas and just saying Israel did this? What the hell's wrong with you? And so I stopped watching Hamas for like a couple weeks. Or Hamas. Hassan Piker for a couple weeks. He's the same guy. No. Hasanabi. The cause of the explosion is contested. So Israel say that it was Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is one of the militant forces that was participating, I believe, in October 7th, but not Hamas themselves. They're like a militia group, I guess you could say. Apparently, it's still debated. And the people who say that it was from Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or whatever, you can group them together. It's just basically, it was from the Palestinian side. US, France, Israel, UK, and Canada. So we already know Israel is not reliable in this regard. I don't think that needs to be elaborated. If it does, let me know in the chat. And I'll go through all the times they've lied or misrepresented things or been wrong and apologized or not apologized. The US itself, need I remind you of the Iraq War? Need I remind you of Obama? The Kunduz hospital, where 40 people were killed, none of them being militants. I believe 6 of them were children. Do I need to also elaborate on the UK? So yeah, let's keep it going. Several organizations concluded that an errant rocket from Gaza was the likeliest explanation, which includes more reliable sources like The Guardian, Economist, CNN, and Associated Press. So apparently Al Jazeera and N12. By the way, Al Jazeera, for as good as it is in terms of providing fast, accurate information, it does get things wrong. So if you're ever reading Al Jazeera, or in my opinion, the premier way to do it is if you see something on Al Jazeera, basically put a tab on it and then see if it is proven true, like in the subsequent days and weeks, or if it is debunked. That's how I treat Al Jazeera. It's not a perfect publication, but I don't think it's horrible, and I think a lot of the reporting they do is very good. Nobody's perfect. I would say they're less than stellar, but they're a hell of a lot better than New York Times. And I would say they're also better than Wall Street Journal. Definitely better than CNN, too. I prefer The Guardian, though, to Al Jazeera. I also prefer The Economist to Al Jazeera. Wall Street Journal is an interesting one because they're owned by Rupert Murdoch, and their editorial board says insane things. But on the other hand, they also have been exposing the Trump stuff recently, and in its heyday, in its prime, stock market news-wise, and also the fact that they were very pro-immigration, the Wall Street Journal is a very interesting publication. The only thing that I worry about is the editorial influence of the ownership. And I think you can never really trust a publication. I don't care what they say or how independent it is in the contracts. If you're owned by somebody who has an inherent agenda, like, Fox News, New York Post, Wall Street Journal, all owned by the same guy, even if a lot of their reporting is good, you have to take it in stride and basically do sort of a guilty until proven innocent thing, where you read an article, say, okay, this is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Let's see if the article is actually credible. Also, by the way, it's so hot in here. Let me open this door. I'm going to die, dude. This room is Hamas. This room is Hamas. Sorry, guys, I'm back. Don't tune out. I'm back. It's just hot in here. I'm coming, guys. Oh, we're putting the lights off again. We're going cozy mode. We're going cozy mode, guys. Oh, hello. Oh, wow, it's dark in here. You know what? We'll take it. I don't care. I'm a perfectionist. We got to turn on the lights, guys. We got to turn on the lights. But I will lower it so it's just a nice, cool, somber night. There we go. Now we are here. It's still too dark, but I don't care. Whatever. Anyways, let's continue. Let's continue, guys. Hit that subscribe button. Tap that subscribe button right up here. If you prefer this lighting, if you think this lighting is good. Also, tap that subscribe button if you can see my acne. Hit that subscribe button. Balls McSpanky, Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson were gay lovers. Go ahead, censor me. No, I just agree. I want to believe that's real. We need America to heal. And at this time, if Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson were gay lovers, wouldn't America be a better place? I'm joking, by the way. Also, JG, I agree with you. Using Wikipedia is also bad as a source. However, the way Wikipedia works, JG, is that anybody can edit it. That is true. But all the major articles and major topics, especially controversial ones, are protected. So, JG, I'm guessing you don't know how Wikipedia works, which is fine because I used to think that too. I actually made a video when I was like 12 years old about how Wikipedia is not reliable. But let me show you how Wikipedia works. So Wikipedia source list. So the way Wikipedia works, anyone can edit it. That is true. However, the senior editors have control over locking a page, protecting it if it's controversial, and also deciding every single year per an annual vote from editors from literally every single country with internet access around the world. That is not an exaggeration. The way Wikipedia works there is they basically go through and see what are accurate. Gigi said they would call him a bigot even if he was gay. Probably, but I want to believe that. Kevbo, I don't know what you mean. Are you talking about the gay stuff or are you talking about Wikipedia? Either way, yeah. I do, and that's why college academic frown on it, so it's biased like Google. I mean, I would say any source is inherently biased in theory. The best way to reduce bias, in my opinion, is to double check it with as many sources as possible. Obviously, it's going to take forever if you do 50 billion sources, right? I think a good rule of thumb is treat it like a source aggregator. You getting sources yourself and being the source aggregator is painstaking, and it takes forever, right? But if you have a source aggregator that says this is verified by 30 sources, and you go to the source aggregator, you scroll down, and you see all the sources are reliable. That's the way to do it. And funny enough, Wikipedia's source aggregator is better than most mainstream news. I'm not exaggerating. So anyways, this is Wikipedia. The way it works, essentially, this is how they decide what sources are credible and what are not. Me? JG, I appreciate that. By the way, if you want to know what my actual political opinions are, I believe in mostly of what George Washington believed in, other than the slavery part. I believe that political parties are toxic. I believe that international intervention, unless you're doing it in a way that's collaborative, is mostly bad. And I would also believe that the worst possible crimes you can do are extinguishing someone's life, because they never can get that back no matter what. Even if you're permanently disfigured, disabled, traumatized, you're still alive. But in crimes like this, especially genocide, it is the evil of all evils. So that's why I identify as an independent. If you actually added up all my things, the closest senator to me is Bernie Sanders, and Bernie is more authoritarian than I am. Bernie is more pro-State Department than I am. I am more anti-State Department. Remember, State Department, the guys who lied to you about 9/11, who lied to you about the Iraq War? Bernie votes for more of their stuff than I would have if I was in his seat. And some of the other people who are close to me are like Thomas Massey, who is a Republican libertarian. Also AOC, who is not a libertarian, but she's more libertarian than she is authoritarian. And also, by the way, I don't vote unconditionally with the Libertarian Party, because the Libertarian Party is kind of a joke, which sucks, because I would love to have a real Libertarian Party, but the problem is everyone who's in it's insane. Remember when they they said driver's licenses are oppression? Let me find that one. Yeah, if I can find it. Libertarian Party. Driver's license. Yes, that's the most famous thing the Libertarian Party has done, is saying that driver's licenses are a form of government oppression. Hugh says, are you on crack? No comment. But anyways, Q, keep writing those articles. I've been founding and following the QAnon blog. I really like your work. Can you please free us from the deep state, Q? Please. Please free us from the deep state, Q. I think that you're doing fantastic work in freeing America. Guys, hit that subscribe button for QAnon. Hit that subscribe button. Also, I'm joking. Okay, anyways. Here we go. So this is what a libertarian debate is, and this is why I'm an independent who has libertarian ideals, but I am not a member of the Libertarian Party, nor will I ever unconditionally defend any party. So, also, JG, I really do appreciate the compliment. Yeah, I'm a chill guy, I hope. So yeah, this is the Libertarian Party, and let's see if we can get them to help us with driver's licenses and free us from oppression. Let's see it. I personally think driver's licenses are a good thing, but hey, maybe that's just me.
Mr. Peterson, I have a feeling I know how this answer is going to be. Should someone have to have a government-issued license to drive a car?
Hell no.
Dr. Feldman.
A car is like a gun or anything else. As long as you're using it right and not using it to hurt other people, you should have a right to use it. A license and a permit is just another way to get some money and inconvenience.
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah. That's what I would say. This guy is right. Dr. Mark Feldman. He said, as long as you use it safely, it is fine, right? Wait a minute. But how do you enforce that? How do you enforce stuff, but like there's no laws? So how do you do it? But no driver's license. That's bad. That's bad. See what I mean? This is what I mean by Libertarian Party being a joke. They take it a little... The Libertarian Party is more anarcho-libertarian, and it's almost exclusively, from what I've seen, some shade of right-wing libertarian. And people forget that libertarian is not right or left. Libertarian literally is the opposite of authoritarian. Go to the political axis. Libertarian, down. Authoritarian, up. Left, communism. Right, capitalism. Different shades in there. More authoritarian capitalism, fascism. More authoritarian versions of socialism or whatever, left-wing ideologies economically. That's how you get to communism. Libertarian is the opposite. It's down. Libertarian at its extremes is also anarchy. But libertarian as a normal human being, literally, all it means is less government oppression. And what I mean by that is not
The people.
Mr. McAfee.
I don't think licenses are required. However, if you are under 16 and your parents say you can drive and you haven't done it before, you should put a flashing pink light on your roof at least so we can get out of your way. But that at the most.
this guy, John McAfee. If you don't know his story, by the way, John McAfee. If you ever seen that McAfee antivirus, he created that, and he has a crazy story where he did a bunch of drugs and some other stuff. So yeah. Also, John, licenses at 16. Boo. Boo. That's oppression.
Mr. Perry.
The government requires licenses for
I love this guy.
far too many things. The government requires licenses for people to broadcast radio. The government requires licenses to get married. They require a license to drive. What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster? Absolutely not.
Hell yeah. I don't want no license to make toast in my toaster. Mama Molly says these aren't libertarians. I would argue they are, but they're very extreme anarchist libertarians. It seems like most of them right-wing anarchist libertarians. I would say any ideology pushed to its extreme is bad. Obviously, there's different kinds of ideologies that go to their extremes. Obviously, there's different consequences for those extremes. But hey, just being a reasonable human being and saying, hey, war, not a good idea unless you have to. Killing people, bad. Government cracking down on people and spying on them ridiculously, in their own homes, especially if they're American citizens, bad. Patriot Act, bad. Like, those are very reasonable things. License required, but no payment, so you can make sure you can drive and know the rules of the road. I agree, 100% agree. That is something I 100% agree with, and the reason why is because a lot of people cannot afford licenses, but to get to work, you need a car and a license. And if you spent, most of your money on a car, registration in some states is literally hundreds of dollars. I'm not kidding. Depends on the state, right? Michigan, it costs, I believe, it's like $200, maybe a little under that. So, yeah. You can afford a car. People can be like, oh, you can't afford a registration, but you can afford a car. It's like, yeah, I spent all my money on my car. Now I need a registration to go places. So dude, what do you mean? Q, the answer to that would be the taxpayer. And the reason why is because now more people who go to work can pay taxes. So Q, if you did an economic study, which by the way, my undergraduate degree is economics from the University of Michigan, one of the best economic programs in the country. If you actually taxed that and gave more people, especially from low-income communities, licenses free out of pocket, that would actually produce more tax revenue than the cost of those licenses in aggregate. I think there's studies about that already, but either way, if there isn't or is not, you want more taxpayers producing wealth, more people driving, more people going on the roads and using the public infrastructure that is already paid for, more people paying taxes to the jobs that keep those roads up. There is a role for government. My point is just that the role as a libertarian believer, in terms of libertarian ideology, not the party, obviously, is that you do not need the government to literally commit tyranny. You do not need to be authoritarian, or at least more authoritarian than you are libertarian. You don't need to do these endless wars. You don't need public-private partnerships where we are literally selling out people's health care and getting people killed for the expense of profit. That is not the type of libertarianism I believe in. That's not the type of libertarianism you should believe in. And that's definitely not the whole of libertarianism as the Libertarian Party claims to represent. I would love to see the Libertarian Party grow and change and become more big tent libertarian, more populist libertarian, but it's not right now. I hope it does eventually, but it's not. Anyways, taxes are anti-libertarian. Not true. Taxes can be anti-libertarian, but I would argue that taxes in many instances are libertarian. And the reason why is those taxes allow more people freedom. What I mean by that, let's say you got rid of all the taxes for the roads. What do you do now? Do you have the freedom to go get a job that's 30 minutes away to an hour away? There's no expressway anymore. Do you have the freedom to not get your life ended in a car accident? Nope, there's no more traffic lights. Sorry. What about road signs? So that's a tax that pays for roads. You would say that's anti-libertarian? I would argue that's more libertarian than not having a tax because it empowers the most number of people to actually have the freedom to decide what they want to do with their own lives in terms of their occupation. That's what I would argue. So I think I'm cooking you, by the way. If you want to come on and debate this QAnon, if you're behind the posts for QAnon, I mean, hit that subscribe button, first of all. Second of all, give me some inside info about the next Q drop. I'm looking forward to it. I'm kidding, by the way. I hope this doesn't get taken out of context. Stop trying to redefine libertarianism into socialism. You know what? Q, you're right. Let's go see what that means. Libertarianism. Libertarianism, for the French libertaire, and free and egalitarian, or from Latin libertas, freedom, is a political philosophy that holds freedom, personal sovereignty, liberty as primary values. Many libertarians believe the concept of freedom is in accord with the non-aggression principle, according to which each individual has the right to live as they choose, so long as they do not violate the rights of others by initiating force or fraud. So wait a minute. They advocate for the expansion of individual autonomy, political self-determination, emphasizing the principles of equality before the law, protection of civil rights, including the rights to freedom of association, speech, thought, and freedom of choice. They generally support individual liberty and oppose authority, state power, warfare, militarism, and nationalism. But some libertarians diverge on the scope and nature of their opposition to existing economic political systems. So I would argue that everything I've said is 100% in the libertarian ballpark, or at least some shade of libertarian or neo-libertarian. Now let's go to socialism. What the hell does that mean? Socialism. Wikipedia. Also, I'm using Wikipedia out of spite. And also spider venom. 100% agree. That's the point I'm trying to drive home. We're going to keep going. Socialism is an economic and political philosophy encompassing diverse economic and social systems characterized by social ownership of the means of production. So I guess we're a socialist state then, right? Because all our roads, or like most of them, are publicly funded as opposed to private ownership. It describes the economic, political, and social theories and movements associated with the implementation of such systems. Social ownership can take various forms, including public, community, collective, cooperative, or employee. As one of the main ideologies in the political spectrum is the standard left-wing ideology in most countries. Types of socialism vary based on the role of markets in planning and resource allocation and the structure of management organizations. How exactly is this completely different from this? Political philosophy. Political philosophies. Foundations of politics. Political institutions such as states like the US government. Types of government. Authoritarianism versus libertarianism. This is both an economic and a political philosophy. Libertarianism is largely not an economic philosophy. Libertarianism is the structure of your civil liberties, the structure of the social order of your country, your foreign policy. This is more economic. Obviously, I think both because socialism is broad and is a range, just like any other idea, it's also interesting. I would agree, Mama Molly. Now you are talking in circles. We are a constitutional republic that is not intact. Q, do I need to use smaller words? Do I need, I mean, hey, your name is just one letter, so maybe I should just start using letters or numbers. I can do that for you if you want, or you could come on here and debate me live if you really want to. I'm fine with that too. So yeah, I did my undergrad in economics, so I think I know what I'm talking about, at least I hope. Otherwise I paid all that money for nothing. I'm also studying sports management. I've studied communications, political science. I've been elected 4 times, once in my HOA, 3 times in Student Gov. I've also worked on many political campaigns, and I've had articles used by numerous outlets. So, yeah, if you want to come on here and debate, I'm interested. Also, Mama Molly, I agree with you. I appreciate you being in the chat, by the way. JG says, our foreign policy is better now, but once we leave the UN, we'll be better. JG, I disagree, and here's why. Without the UN, you get World War II. Without the UN, you get slavery. Without the UN, you get much more fog of war and a lack of the totality in terms of these human rights abuses. Without the UN, a lot of this stuff would be done at the academic level, potentially censored by governments like the US government in regards to the Gazan genocide and any of the other activities that either we've done or internationally. And the reason why the UN is important is not because it's effective. I would argue the UN is very, very, very ineffective and very, very bad at its job of what it's supposed to be. And I would argue leaving it would make things even worse. I think the UN needs to be improved. I think what the UN needs to do is actually have some teeth in regards to rights being violated. In terms of libertarian ideals, if civil liberties are not protected, someone needs to step in. And the problem is, if you have a state actor, whether it's the US, Israel, etc., who doesn't step in and protect the civil liberties of their own citizens, the problem is, if the UN can't do anything or doesn't have the military strength or whatever to do it, then those civil liberty violations continue. And I guess it sounds like authoritarianism where you're saying the UN should invade a country and stop it from doing genocide. But in theory, that is more libertarian than anything else. And obviously, I would hope the UN would do that sparingly and with the agreement of a vast, significant supermajority of states, not just like 10 people. William Dunn, I would disagree, but you're not wrong, William. You're not wrong. I think it has more than just that purpose, but you're not wrong. JG, here's the problem with that thinking. Obviously, let's say for sake of argument that we like the US. Let's say. I would say the US is very flawed, but let's say for sake of argument, the US somehow found the perfect form of governance and everything's fine and we love each other, we have no deaths, whatever. What's the difference between me as an American believing that my governance is superior to every other governance on planet Earth versus somebody with the military capabilities to do terrorism or straight up invade smaller countries or do genocide that also believes their country's the best? And what if we have 200 countries on Earth that all leave the UN and they all believe their countries are the best? You see how that becomes a slippery slope very fast? That's the problem with dictating yourselves, because if the country dictates themselves like Rwanda did, and Rwanda decided themselves to literally mass exterminate the Tutsi minority population, that is a form of self-governance. It's just a self-governance that literally led to the mass extermination of a minority population. That's where you need the UN to step in. That's where international countries need to step in and say, hey, this is wrong, and everybody who's responsible needs to go to jail or face the death penalty, period. That's why countries dictating themselves is a problem at its extreme. Overall, 100% agree. Obviously, you don't want a 100% global society, especially with the diversity of cultures, resources, and needs. But you need some teeth to the UN. You need some prevention and protection of these things that are going on, like what you see in Israel or Russia, Ukraine to an extent. I wouldn't say it's a genocide yet, but I mean, obviously there has definitely been war crimes on both sides. I think people can agree that Russia also especially has seemed to do more of the war crimes. And like I said, civil rights in China in terms of minority populations like the Uyghur Muslims are not exactly great. They also do mass surveillance just like we do on our own citizens, except theirs is arguably worse. Obviously, we don't know the extent. And that's situations where the UN needs to step in, at least for Ukraine and Russia. China is an interesting one. I guess until they technically declare war, would you need to step in? Maybe not, but also like you want to have at least UN monitors there to make sure China's not doing concentration camps, which is what the Uyghur Muslims appear to experience. So I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, yeah. What did Q say? Didn't you just say you are against the death penalty? No, I didn't. I'm not against the death penalty. And the reason why, and by the way, the death penalty is authoritarian, 100%. But I'm not against it, and the reason why is I believe that there are very extreme circumstances where the death penalty, in terms of punishment for a crime, is absolutely necessary to protect the civil liberties and aggregate of others based on somebody who will not change, is 100% guilty, and upheld upon due process. I would say the death penalty in that instance, and by proof, I mean literally like video, audio, DNA, all of the above, not just eyewitness testimony, which is why we have so many innocent people killed in America unjustly with the death penalty. And yes, it is a form of authoritarianism in terms of states giving the death penalty to citizens or non-citizens or anybody they've convicted in their courts. But I would argue that it is a necessary form that provides liberty in the extreme and rare but necessary cases like mass murderers, school shooting people of 20 plus people. That's what I'm saying. That is when the death penalty is something that is necessary, as long as it is 100% proven and upheld upon appeal with due process, the right to an attorney. And I would also argue some level of legal aid, which we don't have in this country yet, because obviously public defenders who have to manage 1 billion people are not going to be as good as people who have time on their hands. JG, the UN, along with the world, has ignored the Christian genocide in the Azerbaijan region, North Africa, Nigeria, Iraq. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. JG, I wouldn't say necessarily every single one of those is a genocide, but I would argue that there have been war crimes and some levels of genocide in many of those places. And I would argue that the UN does not do a good enough job of not only recognizing it, but just like with Israel, not getting involved. The UN needs to get involved. I agree with you, JG. I just think it's baby with the bathwater situation. If you get rid of the UN, you're making things worse, not better. You got to fix the UN or call it something else and fix it, whatever you want. You can't just destroy the entire thing. It's the same thing with Trump and deregulation. I'm going to get labor statistics for everybody. Everybody labor. Everything's computer. The problem is he deregulates things, and many of those regulations are good, especially health regulations, like with the FDA, and you see what the hell is going on right now. William, I would actually agree. No, I agree with your hot take. The only difference is, my difference is that it still does harm to the victims. Imagine telling a victim of that situation, of any of the situations I've said, and telling that victim that you are paying the taxes of this guy and the health care of this dude in prison for the rest of your life after he victimized you and traumatized you or killed your family members. Imagine telling a victim that. Like, nobody will, in that scenario, if you present it that way, be willing. Q, I also agree. I think the U.S. needs to invest in soft power. And the fact that we destroyed, what is it called? What the hell is it called? USAID is an incredible mistake. USAID's purpose is not just to give people free stuff. That's the cover. The idea of USAID is controlling other countries or pacifying them by giving them positive economic, health, other kinds of benefits like trade benefits, sometimes even military protection. The point of USAID or USAID, whatever you want to call it, is that you do these things and sort of create a dependency on the US so that they are far less likely to attack the hand that feeds them, because then we revoke the aid. Is it ethical? Maybe not. Should it be considered perfidy, which is using aid as a weapon of war? There's an argument there. But have we saved millions and millions of lives by giving people health care, by giving people vaccines in poorer countries, by doing USAID, in addition to the foreign policy benefits? I would say yes. And I would say that although it's not ideal, and although there are instances where it's inappropriate, I would agree that USAID, especially if we're talking about saving human lives, I think it's a great thing. And I would also argue that there's an argument to be made that not enough people in the UN are pulling their weight. And what I would argue is USAID needs to be a joint US thing. It should be UN aid. That's what we should call it, UN aid. Instead of US aid, any money we were giving to it, we put it to a UN aid. And any countries that put stuff to UN aid get to decide specifically what they want to do and contribute to. So that way it doesn't undermine the sovereignty of those nations while also making things more accessible because countries are collaborating. That's what I would argue. The UN is supposed to provide military protection, not US aid. I would argue that it's supposed to do anything that countries vote on. The whole point of the UN is that it's basically a way to ensure that there are some minimum standards of international law around the world, whether it's positive things, whether it's preventing negative things, or whether it's just making things make sense, like maps and stuff. The whole point of the UN is make the world make sense. Keep people alive, keep people healthy, improve the quality of life, and then, importantly, keep the data and record of this so that we know what goes well, what goes wrong, what countries did genocide, who are the war criminals, what countries need to do better with letting people have civil liberties. That's what I would argue the point of the UN is. All those things. Anything that these countries vote on in a supermajority manner, or at least collaborate on with other UN members, that is the point of the UN. The UN is a forum. The UN is not supposed to be a government. The UN is a forum for governance, not a government, if that makes sense. Think of it like the EU, but I guess way less effective, way more people, and also way stupider in its design than the EU. I'm not the biggest EU head, but I think the EU in terms of economics is cooking. The EU makes a lot of money. What was the US funding policy when 6th or 7th presidential form? I don't know what you mean by that. Are you saying the 6th or 7th president? We were very isolationist, but that also is in the context of us being a smaller nation that was not a recognized world power. Like, we were gaining steam a little bit, but most of the European countries still treated us as second fiddle. So I would argue that it's not really comparable, but I would say it is in the spirit of America to prevent war and prevent violence. Anyways, I'm going to take a short break and get some water. I'm going to put on some music for you guys. Actually, you know what? You guys want to watch this libertarian debate while I'm gone? Let's watch our good friend. This is a good man. I hope this isn't copyrighted, but we'll find out, I guess. I'll be right back. Listen to the man speak. This is our good friend.
Mr. McAfee.
This government survived, and this nation survived for 150 years with no income taxes. How is that possible? We had a government that was doing reasonable things at small cost. No taxation that involves the sweat of your brow can possibly be legal. And taxation was illegal until 1916. We can fund this government voluntarily. We have national parks. If you want to go to the park, pay some money. If you want to drive on a road, pay $1 for every 1,000 miles you drive. We can do this. But to do this, we have to stop the insanity of a government out of control and growing like a weed. And we can do that.
Mr. Perry.
The President of the United States does actually have the authority to effectively end one institution of the federal government, and that's the DEA, and here's how. We can end the federal war on drugs by instructing the chief of the DEA to set the federal drug schedule of all drugs to 0. This would effectively kick the war on drugs back to the states, and we could end the DEA that way.
Mr. McAfee, would you have voted in favor of the 1964 Civil Rights Act had you been in the Senate?
As many of you know, my wife is black. And having spent 3.5 years living 24 hours a day with her, I can assure you that legislation in no way ended discrimination. What it did is bring to the awareness that it is here, but discrimination will not end until you open your heart and your mind and your judgment to a person of another color, another race, another language, another religion.
Mr. Perry.
Allow me to give everyone a history lesson. The segregation in the South was not because necessarily of racist business owners. It was because of racist legislators telling the business owners that they had to segregate the lunch counters. In Virginia, it was business owners that helped the protesters violate the statute by saying, "Come into my business, violate the law." That should have been outlawed. The forced discrimination should have been repealed. That is the only thing the Civil Rights Act should have done.
Mr. Peterson.
Oh, I believe in gun control. I think that we need to control the government's use of guns. Honestly, no, it's an enumerated right. I believe in a world where gay married couples can protect their marijuana fields with fully automatic machine guns, baby. Oh, yeah. The Constitution of the United States says shall not be infringed. It is an enumerated right, and it doesn't say muskets, it says arms. We have the right to bear arms, and that right will be protected under a Peterson administration for once and for all.
Mr. McAfee. Should one have to get a government-issued license to marry? If same-sex marriage should be legal, what about multiple spouses? Where, if anywhere, would you draw the line?
Licenses for love, or how we choose to deport ourselves after going to bed or before. Good Lord, what right does anyone have in this bedroom? It doesn't matter what the sex is or how many people may or not be there. Good Lord, no, absolutely not.
Dr. Feldman.
I don't need a concealed carry certificate. I don't need any kind of marriage license. I don't need a marijuana grower's permit. I have a constitution. What I need is a government that honors it and doesn't ask for licenses and permits and certificates for things that are none of the government's business.
I think they like your answer. Mr. Perry, North Carolina passed a law that said as to the public sector, one shall use the bathroom that corresponds with the gender on his or her birth certificate. How do you feel about that law?
My question is, where does Buck Angel go to the potty if he goes into North Carolina? If you don't know who Buck Angel is, and based on the applause, most of you probably don't, so I'll tell you. Buck Angel is a transgender porn star. Buck Angel was born a female. Buck Angel now looks like Adam Kokesh, only more buff. But Buck Angel still has a vagina. The Republicans in North Carolina say that Buck Angel should go to the ladies' room. I think that is wrong.
Mr. McAfee, should all drug use be made legal or decriminalized, whether marijuana or heroin? And what do you say about people who argue that if you do that, it would lead to more rampant drug abuse?
The drug uses remain constant, whether it is criminalized or decriminalized, and all drugs should be decriminalized. I have been in prison more than I'm sure most of any 10 of you combined for drug use. So I promise you, that hasn't stopped me, or did not until at the age of 38. I've been clean since 38. It did not stop me from using drugs. Nothing will. Neither, if it were free, would I have used any more. I used as much as my body would tolerate of everything.
Mr. Perry.
I read statutes for fun, and so far I have yet to find the word tomato in any statute. But I don't think anybody here would say that tomatoes are not legal. I think that every substance, whether it be cannabis or crystal meth, should be absolutely as legal as tomatoes. There should not be any regulations on how much you buy, grow, sell, possess, consume, sell to your neighbor, give to your neighbor, throw in the air to land on the ground, wherever it may be. No regulations. Everything should be as legal as tomatoes.
Governor Johnson.
In 1999, I was the highest elected official in the United States to call for the legalization of marijuana. I think that's good news. In 2016, I'm still the highest elected official in the United States to call for the legalization of marijuana, although apparently Bernie Sanders is advocating such, and I think a lot of that has to do with his appeal among millennials. Look, I think when we legalize marijuana, we will take a quantum leap in this country with regard to drug use. If we were to legalize all drugs tomorrow, the world would be a much better place. 90% of drug problems are prohibition-related, not use-related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus.
Mr. Peterson.
Drugs are dangerous. Drugs are dangerous because they're illegal. Drug dealers don't check IDs. When people take drugs, they don't know what they're getting. I believe that if we were to decriminalize all drugs, that we would be living in a safer world. But that's the political issue. The moral issue is that you own your life, you own your body, and you ought to be able to put in it what you please, provided you harm no one else.
Dr. Feldman, should all drug use be made legal or decriminalized, whether marijuana or heroin?
Marijuana should not be legalized like alcohol and tobacco. It should be normalized like caffeine and chocolate. Drug abuse is a medical problem. It shouldn't be a legal problem. If that worked, we should make cancer illegal, diabetes illegal, hypertension illegal, and we would have a much better, safer, healthier country.
Mr. Perry. Mr. Perry, a follow-up question. If you believe in legalizing all drugs, would you at least make certain drugs illegal for children?
As I said, everything should be as legal as tomatoes. I think people are smart enough to know not to give heroin to a child unless under the direct supervision of a doctor. I don't think that people should go to jail. And again, I'm guessing you're defining child the legal way, not the medical way. And those are two distinct things. But again, people are smart enough to know not to give horrible, horrible things to children. Let's look at Portugal. And I'm going over time because everybody else has. Let's look at Portugal for a second. They decriminalized everything 15 years ago. Drug use, drug abuse dropped drastically. Everybody's safer because they're not afraid to go get help if they need it. Right now in this country, people are afraid to go get help because if they go to the doctor will call the damn cops.
Governor Johnson, would you at least make certain drugs illegal for children? Dr. Feldman, you have 60 seconds.
Some may ask Feldman, is he that libertarian? I am that libertarian. I'm that be what you want to be libertarian, that you look good on TV libertarian, that Muslim libertarian, that Jew libertarian, that Christian atheist Hindu libertarian, that Rothbard libertarian, that Jefferson libertarian. You know I'm not messing libertarian. That LGBTQ libertarian, no sex libertarian, that MLK Jr. Malcolm X libertarian, that revolutionary Honor Hall Ron Paul libertarian, that Richard Winger Bill Redpath ballot access libertarian, that Daryl W. Perry no apologies anarchist libertarian, that Gary Johnson New Mexico success libertarian, that Austin Peterson, freedom ninja in your face, libertarian. That John McAfee, world-class badass libertarian. That no pain, no gain, get those petitions signed in the rain, libertarian. That sorry, I'm not sorry, libertarian. That can't stand
the infringements and abuses, Libertarian, that right here, right now, no excuses, Libertarian. I'm that Libertarian.
Mr. McAfee. Mr. McAfee, normally going last is an advantage. Mr. McAfee, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Dr. Feldman.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike. This is my YouTube page, Mox News. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so I thought you guys might want to see this. I thought it was a good debate. I mean, it's just these guys are full of energy. They sound like Constitution-loving Americans. You know what I mean? So like, get your damn laws off me, off my stinking rights. Abolish the IRS now. Legalize everything. I love it. Legalize everything. Legalize freedom. God damn you politicians. All right, so if you want to see the full debate, it's available at the Alternate Mox News YouTube page. There's a clickable link in the text body of the video right here, right below the video there. There's a little box that says Alternate Mox News YouTube page. Click here. Please do so now. You should go over there and subscribe. It was a good debate. It was over 2 hours long.
Thank you, Mox News. Thank you, Mox News. You are our hero. I was so jump scared by that. Oh my God. That was awesome. This guy should be president, I think. I kind of want to look into that other debate. It sounded very interesting. I was going to do more debunking, but I am just so exhausted. It's been a long day. Plus I have homework to do anyway, so I would love to just hang out, watch some classic debates, take it easy, and then I'll probably be done streaming in a couple hours, maybe. I think that's probably the move. What was that debate called, you said? Libertarian socialism versus anarchism debate. That is a jump scare. Oh, man. Ooh, is it this? Is this what you're looking for? Mama Molly, is this what you're looking for? This looks pretty good. We can do a little watch party in here. I'm down. It'd be fun. What is this from? Excerpts from Conversations with History, Beyond State Socialism, Human Nature, Justice versus Power, and the Relevance of Anarcho-Syndicalism. Noam Chomsky. Oh. So this isn't debate, it's just Noam Chomsky kind of cooking. Let me see if I can find debate. Did I type in debate? I thought I typed in debate. Huh. What the hell is physiognomy? I don't know what that is. Is this a debate? Is this the one you guys are looking for? Who is it again? Sorry, I'm going to scroll up in chat. My apologies. Mikhail Bakunin. I got you, Mama. Thank you, Mom. Hit that like for Mother's Day, guys. Hit that like for Mother's Day. Hit that subscribe button for Father's Day. I tried. Is this it? Lex Friedman. Let's rumble. Damn, I can't find it. This might be it. Socialism versus anarchism. Socialism versus anarchism. Actually, that's too easy of a debate. Like, come on, dude. Anarchism is just fucking baby brain socialism, or baby brain anything. It's like, dude, you can't do a society like that. It's just barbarism at that point. Ugh. Gross. Gross. Let me see what we got. I kind of want to watch Ross Perot debates. I'm not going to lie. Public domain. I wonder if they'll let me. Let's find out. I'm going to see if this is allowed. PBS public broadcaster. Let me see.
Good evening and welcome to the first of 3 debates among the major candidates for...
God damn it. I mean, if we actually stop it in a little bit, I think that'd be fine. Are all quotes are the best starting points? Okay, sure. That'd be fun. Interesting. Ooh. Democracy at work. Let's check this bad boy out.
This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work with another response to a question, an Ask Prof. Wolff question from our Patreon community. This question comes from John Ferrer, and it concerns the relationship between the anarchist theoretician and leader Mikhail Bakunin and Karl Marx. And so it opens the whole space for a discussion of the relationship between anarchism and Marxism. And like all the great questions about Marxism and anarchism, it is subject to the different understandings of what those terms mean, to the different interpretations of the philosophies of these two major figures from the 19th century. It also is complicated by the fact that Marx and Bakunin worked together to start the International back in the middle of the 19th century, knew each other, worked with each other, and had a kind of theoretical alliance coupled with strong disagreements. So I will not pretend, as I think many others have, that what I'm about to say is the word on the subject. Everybody's interpretation is just that, an interpretation, and mine is no different in that it's an interpretation based on a way of reading what these two thinkers had to say. So here's the gist of it. What both men agreed on, and what anarchists and Marxists often agree on to this day, is the critique of capitalism and the sense that society could and should do better than capitalism. That is, both Marxism and anarchism have a deep, long-lasting commitment to socialism as the name of the next system, the system we can build on the basis of capitalism and yet break from capitalism to something that's better for most people. A further area of agreement between Marxists and anarchists, at least most of the time, has been that the state is part of what has to go, that the function of the state is to reproduce the dominant class structure. So in capitalism, the state is the servant of capitalism. Its activities, however it pretends to represent everybody, are mainly geared to reproducing the dominant position of capitalists within a capitalist system. In a way, slave states reproduce slavery, states in the feudal period reproduced feudalism, and states in the capitalist era reproduce capitalism, and that therefore the state is the enemy of both anarchists and Marxists because of its role as a major support for capitalism's reproduction. So then where do they disagree? Their major disagreement is on what Marx sometimes referred to as the role of a state that could represent the working class during an intermediate period from the collapse of capitalism, when the state no longer reproduced it, but before the establishment of socialism, there would need to be a state that could serve the interests of an emerging socialism by blocking the use of the state to reproduce capitalism. In other words, Marx's notion of the state as existing in a transitional period was not an endorsement of the state or a thought that the state should exist within socialism, but should be a tool, a way for the working class to have more power to make the transition from capitalism to socialism. This was anathema to Bakunin, who wanted a direct and pretty much immediate assault on the state to get rid of it, and that was not acceptable, Marx's idea of a temporary transitional role for a state or a state apparatus. And so that has remained part of the opposition that is often found alongside the alliance between anarchists and Marxists. Some of you may have heard the phrase, the withering away of the state, and you may know that that was an objective of the Soviet Bolsheviks who made the revolution there in 1917. The very phrase, withering away of the state, was a statement by their leader, Lenin, to underscore that their objective as Marxists included the removal of a state from the society because you were getting rid of the class opposition between capitalists and workers, and therefore did not need a state apparatus to enforce that division. So then why the antagonism? Well, there are many reasons, not the least of which, particularly in the United States, has been that the Cold War, since 1945, in other words, a very long time, 75 years, was phrased as a war between the United States and the Soviet Union, between capitalism and socialism, and that therefore the great demon to be avoided was anything to do with socialism, and that usually meant Marxism and so on. Anarchism kind of got pushed to the side. It wasn't a large major movement. There was no society that embraced it as such, no leadership, since partly anarchists don't want that. And so it wasn't the subject of the same kind of persecution and hostility, even though there are plenty of moments in American history where anarchism was the designated demonization of choice at the time. So anarchism is a way for people to be leftist that at least raises the question here in the United States, what exactly is it? What does it mean? People believe they know what socialism means, Russia, China, Cuba, and so on. They believe they understand that. They don't quite get what anarchism is. Plus, there's this peculiar libertarian strain in the United States that makes hostility to the government attractive to Americans, and anarchism then becomes the left-wing version of all of that, and that may explain also why it resurges from time to time. The basic conclusion I draw from this is that Marxists and anarchists, socialists and anarchists, have much more in common than divides them. There ought to be, and there often has been, practical collaborations, alliances, coalitions between them for all kinds of fights against capitalism. Let them debate the pros and cons of a temporary transitional state. Let them debate the pros and cons of the withering away of the state, how that happens, how fast that happens, the forms it takes. That should not prevent the collaboration on the enormous areas of agreement that can be summarized as the critique of capitalism and the advocacy of a transition to socialism. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work. Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. I have a couple of announcements. They're important, and I think they're worth your attention. It's a plenary session and workshop on how we can make the solidarity economy real. It's presented by the Left Forum, the People's Network for Land and Liberation, the Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City, CENIC, and of course, Democracy at Work. It will take place at Women Building Up in Brooklyn, New York on October 11th. To register, again, go to our website, democracyatwork.info, and click on the banner at the top of the home page, and you will find out all you need to know about it, to register for it, and so on. Finally, before jumping into today's session, I need, sadly, to let you know that we are having a problem where you can help us. The proliferation of fake videos of me presenting some of my ideas is now becoming a major problem. A good number of you have written to us about it. And to those of you, I want to say, first of all, thank you. You're helping us. And no, it's not a project of ours whatsoever. That's why the physical likeness of me is sometimes bizarre. The most recent example, the upper part of my face is actually me, but the lower part has been changed. It is somebody else's mouth, not mine, saying words I don't say, producing a video I never produced nor authorized. It is now happening so often that I need to ask you if you see such a thing, or if you're concerned to find out whether it's genuine or not, get in touch with us. We will tell you. We report all of this to Google. We try to get them taken down from YouTube. But as you can imagine, we are not the only one suffering from this kind of use or abuse of AI. But it's becoming a serious problem with the proliferation that's going on. People are also, I might mention, charging money for these sorts of things. Only makes the abuse worse. I also want to catch us up to start with our substance today to a story we covered earlier. It was the strike of the flight attendants at Air Canada and Air Canada Rouge. You may remember, let me help you remember, that they went on strike for very, very good reasons. We followed the strike. The Canadian government, which is a part owner of Air Canada, only a little part, but a part, the government ordered these workers, who are also its employees, because the government is a part owner of the airline, ordered them back to work under existing legislation. And here came the important part why we featured it. The workers said, you're not going to intimidate us, and you're not going to deprive us of our right to strike. So they didn't heed the government's demand. And Air Canada couldn't run its airplanes. So Air Canada caved in and reached an agreement with the workers to end the 4-day strike. And they reached it by a temporary agreement that had to be voted on. And while that did raise some of their wages in some of the ways that they demanded, it wasn't enough. And how do we know that? Because on September 6th, when the final votes were counted to see what the members thought of the agreement, 99.1% rejected it. So they have to go back and bargain again. And the reason is simple for those of you wondering. The last time these workers signed a contract, back in 2015, they secured 2% wage increase per year for 10 years. So they went up roughly 20%, a little more. Prices went up 30%, which meant that many of the workers, after 10 years of work, with all the extra experience they got doing 10 years of work, and then therefore the better quality of the work that they did, they were earning less in terms of what they could afford to buy than they were at the beginning. They were outraged. They wanted a bigger wage. That's why the contract was rejected. These are strong unionists, and I want to shout out to them, we see you, and we admire and respect what you are fighting for. Okay, now to the substance for today. We're going to be talking about recent polls about what people here in the United States think about socialism. We're going to talk about Epstein briefly. We're going to talk about poverty, and we're going to talk about France, where people have been hitting the streets to make the kinds of points we make here. Okay, let's jump in, and one more thing. After the break, we will be interviewing Steve Smith, a lawyer here in New York City, who is a co-author of a new book about fascism in the United States. Recent polls show that majorities of Democrats have become favorable to socialism. Friends, I did not think in my lifetime I would ever read such a sentence as part of a news or any other kind of program, but here we go. The numbers are right there. In July, 8%, this last July, 8% of Democrats polled supported Israel's war on Gaza. That is a remarkably low percentage of Democrats supporting what the Democratic Party officially endorses. Think about it. Then, much more recently, literally a couple of weeks ago, the New York Times Siena College poll, early in September, showed that Mr. Mamdani, a socialist running for mayor of New York City, was polling 37%, it's now up over 40 if I'm not mistaken, versus his major opponent, Mr. Cuomo, a notorious former governor, who was polling 24%, not even close. I now understand that after much long hesitation, New York Governor Hochul has endorsed Mr. Mamdani. Also, apparently, if you put your finger up and the wind is blowing, you can figure out which way it's going. On the 10th of September, the Gallup poll, one of the oldest and most respected polling companies in the United States, reported 60% of Democrats view socialism positively. And when asked about whether they view capitalism positively, 42% said yes. Let me do that again. 60% of Democrats polled view socialism positively, as against 42% of capitalists. That led a very well-known commentator, Harold Meyerson, who writes regularly for the American Prospect magazine, to argue in its latest issue that the old centrists who run the Democratic Party nationally are no longer the mainstream of the Democratic Party, which they constantly invoke as if they were. They aren't. They're trying to hold on to a party whose majority has moved on. And that's not a tenable situation and will explode American politics soon. Might lead you to wonder whether the best way to oppose Mr. Trump, for those of you that are interested in that, is to embrace the new direction of the Democratic Party instead of fighting it, because it is, or it sure looks like it, the wave of the future for the Democratic Party, for most of it, and that remains the largest potential opposition to the Trump government out of conventional politics, unless and until that's changed. I want to turn next to Nigel Farage. He's the head of a new right-wing political party in Britain that's polling very high in that country. He commented on the Epstein case, and I want to read it to you because I can't do better than this. Here it is, Mr. Nigel Farage trying to replace Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister of Britain. Quote, "So the idea that you're guilty by association because you knew Epstein, I mean, you would put the whole of America in jail who were prominent people in business or media in the 1980s. I have no comment on Mr. Farage's insight. I will add that one of Mr. Epstein's apparently many close friends, who became later the ambassador of Great Britain to the United States, Peter Mandelson, was fired in the middle of September from his job as ambassador of Great Britain because of his closeness to Mr. Epstein, which included encouraging Epstein to fight the charges against him, later proved, of child molestation, sexual activity, and all the rest. Okay. Final items we have time for. I want to bring to your attention the remarkable activities in France that reached a peak on the 10th of September. I had mentioned before that they would be worth looking at. They were. Hundreds of thousands of French people went into the streets, not just of Paris, their capital city, but of many other cities across France, east, west, north, and south. They were protesting what they called the government's austerity program. And in particular, here are the things that they pointed to. The government wanted to cancel 2 national holidays in France. And by cancel, I mean everybody would have to go to work on those 2 days instead of have a holiday, but for no extra pay. Think about that. Number 2, to cut the pensions for the elderly that are on a pension. And finally, to cut massively the National Health Service, to cut the money that basically takes care of the medical needs of the French. They have a very good National Health Service that covers you from birth to death or anything that happens to you. I've actually used it myself when I was a visiting professor there. And the people said, we will not tolerate it. The government collapsed. A new prime minister had to be named. Mr. Macron picked somebody who's going to try to do the same thing. And guess what? The French people said, you do it again, we will do it again too. Their slogan was, let's block everything. And that's what they did on September 10th. And that's what's coming again to a Macron government in France that cannot learn from its ever larger mistakes. We've come to the end of the first half of today's show. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Michael Smith on American fascism. Before we jump into the second half of today's show, I wanted to thank you for your very generous response to our fundraising efforts this year, and in particular in the last couple of months. And in part responding to that, we are extending the availability of our limited edition linen-covered hardcover version of Understanding Capitalism, the book I wrote and that we have been making available now for quite a while. If you are interested, I will be signing copies of that hardcover, and they will be available to you as they have been over the last few weeks. Just simply send an email to us at info@democracyatwork.info and put in the subject line limited edition. We will send you all the information you need to order and receive your copy, signed copy, of Understanding Capitalism in its hardback. And thank you again for your kind attention to the fundraising dimension of what we do. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. I am very happy, proud indeed, to bring to my microphones Michael Stephen Smith. He is a New York City attorney, a former board member of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and the co-host of the nationally broadcast radio show Law and Disorder. Together with his co-host and co-author, Michael Ratner, they wrote a book some years ago called Who Killed Che? So first of all, Michael Smith, thank you very much for giving us a little bit of your time today.
Nice to be with you, Rick, my old friend and colleague and comrade. Good to be on your show.
Thank you. Okay, I want to jump right in. You recently released a co-authored, edited book entitled From the Flag to the Cross, Fascism, American Style. Fascism has come into the common conversations across America in recent months, recent years, more than ever. So yours is clearly a timely book. But I wanted to begin by asking you why you chose, at this point, to produce a volume like that.
I was inspired by a pamphlet written by the great socialist leader Leon Trotsky, who wrote it in the 30s, the era of fascism, the beginning era of fascism. Trotsky's pamphlet was called Fascism, What It Is and How to Fight It. What it is and how to fight it. I wanted to do something along that line because I wanted to be able to educate people about the nature of fascism and what they could do about it. And I was guided by two people, Bertolt Brecht, who said, how can anyone tell the truth about fascism unless he is willing to speak out against capitalism, which brings it forth? And the other person that inspired me was the American novelist Sinclair Lewis, who wrote a novel in 1935 called It Can Happen Here. And Lewis was awarded a Nobel Prize. He was a great author in the 20s and 30s, and he said, when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in the flag and carry a cross. And that's what our book is about. We see it now, and we're trying to educate people about what it is and what they can do about it.
Okay, let me push to you a question that I know many of my audience members have sent in because I know it's on their mind. What exactly do you mean by American fascism? Why is that word in your book title and on your mind to talk about?
Well, what are the qualities of American fascism? For one thing, it's anti-democratic. You can't have a democratic country with 1,100 billionaires. It's impossible. The Supreme Court has recently ruled that money is protected by the First Amendment, so elections are rigged and fixed. It costs $1 billion to run for president. Secondly, fascism is racist. Third, it's misogynist. It's totally masculine. One of the authors, Diane Feely, told a story about how she turned on the television on Canadian TV. She lives in Detroit. She gets Canadian TV. She's hoping to get away from American TV. And what she saw was the Trump inauguration. And the first speaker took off his shirt. He was a wrestler. How more hyper-masculine can it be? It's misogynist. It's hyper-masculine. It looks for scapegoats. In Germany, you had the Jews as scapegoats. In America, you have immigrants as scapegoats. Trump and the people around him are trying to deflect from the anger and frustration and despair that people feel. They're trying to deflect that onto scapegoats. And that's why they're going after immigrants.
Michael, would you say that the fascism is coming and you're worried about its arrival? Or would you say it's already here?
I would say that it's coming. Part of it's here. They're taking baby steps. In fact, little more than baby steps. I think they've rounded second base and they're heading for third. And I think that unless we mobilize a population, particularly the unions and particularly the working class, because they have the power to stop it. Unless we do that, we're not going to be able to stop it. They're making great progress.
Okay, would you think that fascism in America is a project you associate with Mr. Trump, or you associate with the Republican Party, or you associate with the Democratic Party, or should we rather think of it as a project of the corporate big shots, the billionaires, as you put it? How do you understand who is making the fascism happening? Who is making it come in the way that you think it's coming?
Well, Trump is a symptom of the disease. He's not the disease. The disease is capitalism. We have 200 years ago, you had a invigorating capitalism that brought about the American Revolution, brought about the First Amendment and democratic rights. You have now what we call a geriatric capitalism. And I think that what we have in fascism is kind of a preemption on, I think, what the ruling class is afraid of is a huge uprising. And they're taking steps now in anticipation to quell that uprising. I think that the initial steps they've taken, most alarmingly, the use of the National Guard to take over Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago. Trump and his people behind him figured out a way to get around the Posse Comitatus Act, which says that you can't use the military for domestic law enforcement. They got around it by going through Washington, D.C. And because Washington, D.C. doesn't have a governor, the Posse Comitatus Act said you can't use troops in one state and send them to another state without the permission of both governors. But if you send troops into Washington, D.C., which is run by the federal government, you can do that. So they've got troops now from places like South Carolina, Mississippi. They can take those troops and they can send them anywhere. Trump recently threatened to send them to Chicago. He backed off. Why? Because Chicago is a city of 758,000 Black people. And I think Trump had second thoughts about taking on that kind of a population. By the very nature of Black oppression, Black people will be in the vanguard in the fight against fascism. They always have been. And I think Trump had second thoughts about it. But he did post a very scary post called Chocopolypse. He said, we're sending troops into Chicago. This is the reason we renamed the Department of Defense the Department of War. And then he put these little emojis in the bottom of helicopters, which is suggestive by the right wing of the helicopters Pinochet, the fascist dictator in Chile, used to throw people out of. He put that into his post. Trump is a very scary man, but it's not Trump. It's the whole system. Trump is just a representative of it. He's being used in a sense. But Trump is more than just a politician. He's a cult figure. Trump said when he was running the first time that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. And that's true, he probably could. I have an example to show that he's just not a political figure, but a cult figure. Way back in 1988, a hapless politician named Gary Hart was running for president. And he got caught on a yacht with a lovely woman named Donna Rice. The photographer took a picture of the two of them. Now, Hart was likable, handsome, articulate. He was probably a good candidate. But what happened was when the photographer took the picture, he took a picture of the yacht, and the name of the yacht was Monkey Business. After that, Hart was dead in the water. Compare that to Trump and Stormy Daniels. Trump was messing around with Stormy Daniels. What happened to him? Absolutely nothing. And then he wrote off the payment that he made to Stormy Daniels. What happened to him about that? Nothing. He's got a lot of support. Chris Hedges says that Trump got 74 million votes in 2024. 74 million votes. It's a lot of people. And a lot of those people are Christian fascists, and they revere Trump. They think that he's some kind of godlike figure. And that's our problem. We've got a guy who's more than just a politician. He's a godlike figure. We've got to counter that. The only way that we can counter that is by the power of the working class. What we need is a vast socialist movement, and that's what we need to build. The unions in our country were pretty much de-radicalized when they were busted up in 1947. They're not quite dead. They're coming back. We used to have 1/3 of the population in unions. We now have 11%, and 6% of those are public unions. So they've been weakened, but they're not entirely dead. They're coming back, and we have to support that. I wanted to say one other thing. The way we counter Trump and cultism is by offering to the working class a program that connects with them. We have to reintegrate them back into society. They're estranged. They're totally despairing. You know, half the population in this country doesn't have the accumulated wealth of the top 3 people in America. The top 3 people in America have more money, more wealth than the bottom 1/2 of the population. They work from hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. They've got a $7.25 minimum wage that hasn't gone up in years. The Democrats could have raised it, but they haven't. So we're very weak. We have to come back, and the way to do that is the way that Mamdani in New York is doing it, by offering people a solution to their problems. He's saying free buses, childcare, grocery stores, rent freeze. It's what Kwame Sawant, one of the authors in our book, we finish up with a chapter on her campaigns. She was the city councilwoman in Seattle for 10 years, and she was able to gain a minimum wage in Seattle of over $20 an hour. $20 an hour. She got a rent freeze in Seattle. She got a tax on big corporations like Amazon and raised $400 million. That's the kind of program we need. She didn't back off when she was confronted by the Democrats. She stood up to them. And that's what we're hoping that Mamdani will do in New York City. And we should remember that Mamdani doesn't have any support from the top Democratic leadership. None at all. None of them will endorse him. None of them will support him. Cuomo, his opponent, is getting secret support from Trump. So that's what we're up against. We're up against big money, organized in the think tanks in Washington, D.C. Trump doesn't dream up these legislations. He's not even capable of that. The legislation that he's doing is written by Project 2025, they put it across his desk and he signs it. That's our problem. Trump is a tool and he's a very effective one. So that's what we're up against.
Michael, we're running out of time, but before we lose our final minute here, you've been very eloquent, very clear. I really want to thank you, but I do want to tease out of you. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? How do you feel about where we're about to head as a nation?
Chris Hedges wrote the first chapter in our book on Christian nationalism. And he said, it's been a slow coup d'etat by the capitalists. It's all over. They've won. Jim Lafferty, who's my co-host on the radio show and who wrote the introduction of the book, doesn't agree. I'm not sure. I think they probably have won. But I think, like Chris says, I fight fascism not because I think we can win, but because it's the right thing to do. And I think that we've got some current possibilities now. The Mamdani campaign is a very hopeful sign. 5 million people in the streets on the demonstration on the No King's Day is a very hopeful sign. As Ernest Mandel, the great economist who you admire, said, we're at the foot of the Himalayas. We don't have adequate tools, but we've got to climb up that mountain. And that's how I feel.
Michael, you've been doing this kind of work all of your life. I've known you for many years. It's an honor to have you join us, and your eloquence on this subject could not be more timely at this moment. Thank you very much. And let's see whether in a short time we can bring you back and take a look at what has happened to American fascism. Again, the title of the book, From the Flag to the Cross, Fascism, American Style. And to my audience, as always, I say, I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. I want to begin by thanking Charlie Fabian and all of you who have sent in materials for Charlie to work up and to help us plan our programs. You can and please do continue to send us what you have. charlie.info438@gmail.com. And likewise, our recommendation that if you like this program and the economic analyses we present, then there's a companion volume that you will find useful called Understanding Capitalism, which begins with these kinds of segments, but goes into them much more systematically and much more deeply than we have the time to do here. It's available, as all of our books are, at our website. Today is going to be a special program. We're not going to have short segments. We're not going to have a guest to interview. Instead, I've prepared a presentation that responds to something many of you have asked me to do, plus something which the literature exploding all around us, articles, books, newspaper stories, videos, obviously show an interest. It has to do with whether the category of fascism applies to what is going on in the United States today. On the 14th of June, there were demonstrations all over the country. Many of them carried signs opposing fascism in the United States in one form or another. So let us do this in a reasonable, thoughtful way. So I'm going to call today's program, How Far Does the Fascism Analogy Work? Does it illuminate, and to what extent what is going on in the United States today. And I'm going to use a systematic comparison between the most important historical case of fascism, that of Nazi Germany, with what is going on here. And I think that will help us see how far the analogy works, what are the similarities, but what also are the differences. So I'm going to begin with Germany. And the story of fascism in Germany is a story of a working class, the German working class, that was lifted up in a spectacular way across the 19th century, all the way up to 1918. Why that year? Because that is the last year of World War I. Before that war began, which is 1914, Germany had gone from being a collection of small little countries, not all one country at all, many small principalities, dukedoms, little kingdoms, divided, hostile, often speaking languages that were similar but dialectic and different in their dialects, and so on. The 19th century saw Germany go from a backwater agricultural society to a modern industrial society, to go from many scattered jurisdictions to one unified, powerful German nation. And through it all, a rising standard of living and the arrival of a modern, highly skilled, highly industrialized working class. The 19th century was a good century for the rise of Germany. Its most spectacular politician, Otto von Bismarck, rose with it. The great unifier fought a whole bunch of wars to bring all of these little countries under one umbrella and to make a powerful modern Germany. In fact, by the second half of the 19th century, Germany and the United States were the two big up-and-coming economic powerhouses, both of whom, in their different ways, challenging the dominant economic power of that time, the British Empire. World War I changed that. The German working class, which had felt itself to be the most educated, the most sophisticated, the most modern, and in many ways they were. The German working class, who had seen the 20th century as the new century in which they would really rise to their full potential. These were German working class families that had done well enough in the 19th century to have real savings. The Germans were and are very frugal people. They really felt that they were on the cusp of being the great German empire. They had acquired some colonies in Africa and elsewhere by that time, so they were competing globally with countries like England and France, who had been doing it for a longer time. Everything was smashed in World War I. No one had prepared the German working class for the possibility, let alone the reality, that they would fight a war and they would lose. And in those years, from when the loss became clear, 1917, 1918, in the years that followed, the German working class suffered what can only be called a trauma. And of course, I'm doing this because I'm going to show you that the United States isn't so different. But back to Germany. What happened? They lost the war. Part of the punishment of being the loser in the war was that their colonies were taken away from them and given to France or Britain and so on. More than that, they were forced to pay reparations, huge punishment fines after the war was over that they had to pay for years after the war to the countries that had defeated them, above all, Britain and France. Britain and France had borrowed from the United States to fight the war, so they used the reparations Germany gave them to pay back their loans to the United States. So the U.S., Western Europe, all lived off of, in large part, the Germans who paid reparations. In part because that bankrupted Germany, they suffered an inflation, the worst inflation any modern industrialized economy has faced in the last several centuries. During the year 1923, the German currency went from about 6 or 7 to a US dollar to $1 billion for a US dollar. Germans took their paycheck in a bag, paper currency in a bag at midday lunch break, ran home, gave it to someone in their family who would run to the store to spend that money, because if you didn't spend it right away, by the end of the day, it wouldn't be worth anything. Prices were doubling every 45 minutes. Americans have no idea what such a thing can be, but I'm talking about something literally a century ago. This is not ancient history. But what it did was wipe out the savings of the German working class. In 1 year, gone. You may have saved for 50 years across 3 generations, and what you had saved was now enough to buy maybe a quarter pound of butter. That was 1923. A few years later, 6 years later, the Great Depression hit. The collapse of global capitalism, 1929, and what had not been destroyed by the war and by the inflation was completely destroyed by the Depression, which threw millions of Germans out of work. It was too much for any working class to suffer. Everything destroyed. Your savings, your job, your income, your community, your hopes, your future, everything. And that created a desperation, which the political leaders of the time were unable to cope with. The right wing couldn't, the left wing couldn't. The conventional parties acted like they couldn't imagine what to do. Or worse, they did things which made everything worse. The mass of the people began to look for more extreme political spokespeople because the conventional, traditional ones sounded so empty-headed, so lame, and so totally inadequate. On the left, that meant the rise of the socialist and communist parties of Germany, who in the last election they had, 1932, together got half the vote. And Mr. Hitler of the extreme right wing got roughly the other half. The German industrialists looked at this situation, the collapse of their economy, the collapse of their society, the rise of socialists and communists who both declared capitalism to be their enemy and what had to go. So the business community said, we have to make common cause with this character, this little short fellow with the mustache, whom they didn't like, whom they didn't want, whom they had imprisoned earlier, looked down on as odd, but they made a deal because they needed a political force in order to survive. That's what they felt like as capitalists, as employers. So a deal was struck between the employers and Mr. Hitler, and that's how he came to power in the January of 1933. Here's my point. The United States also in the 19th century developed and delivered to its people an incredible rising standard of living. The difference was they didn't lose World War I, so it continued, and they didn't lose World War II. And indeed, after World War II, the American working class enjoyed a situation that no working class had had before. High and rising standard of living, high and rising wages. The American working class, like the Germans before them, thought that this would never end, thought that this would last forever, thought that they were the special United States, the exception where enterprise would succeed and where wages would rise. And then came 1970. And in the 1970s, all of that came to an end. It wasn't a war, the way it had done it to the German working class, but it was something just as bad. Three things happened in the 1970s and 80s that changed everything. Number one, a technical revolution. The computer, then the robot, then artificial intelligence, wiping out millions of jobs. And where? In the best paid white male industrial workers, the ones who had strong unions. Number two, many of those jobs that didn't disappear with automation were relocated to China, to Brazil, to India. Millions of jobs lost to relocation because companies could make more profits producing with lower wage workers over there, so they went there. They could make more profits by serving the big markets over there, which were growing faster than the American one by that time. And finally, the immigrants who came in desperate because of the changes in their society, looking for jobs, willing to work under poorer conditions and lower wages than Americans had gotten used to. A 1-2-3 punch: automation, relocation, immigration. And for white, well-paid, male, unionized American workers in manufacturing, it was as devastating a trauma as that suffered by the German working class from 1918 to 1929. We've come to the end of the first half. In the second half, I'll show you how that parallel shapes our conditions right now. Before we jump into the second half of today's show, I wanted to thank you for your very generous response to our fundraising efforts this year, and in particular in the last couple of months. And in part responding to that, we are extending the availability of our limited edition linen-covered hardcover version of Understanding Capitalism, the book I wrote and that we have been making available now for quite a while. If you are interested, I will be signing copies of that hardcover, and they will be available to you as they have been over the last few weeks. Just simply send an email to us at info@democracyatwork.info and put in the subject line limited edition. We will send you all the information you need to order and receive your copy, signed copy, of Understanding Capitalism in its hardback. And thank you again for your kind attention to the fundraising dimension of what we do. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. We are discussing the parallels between Germany and its fascism and what the United States is going through now. Before the break, we were up to the parallel trauma of the German working class under its conditions after World War I, and now the American working class under its conditions after World War II. Since 1970s, the three: immigration, relocation of jobs abroad, and automation have decimated the jobs of the white, male, working class, unionized workers. Millions and millions of them lost their jobs, lost their income, lost their self-esteem, plunged their communities into economic difficulty because people didn't have the jobs to earn the money to spend it. in the local bowling alley or the local dry cleaner or anywhere else. And the problem in the United States was like what happened in Germany. The two political parties were useless. The Republican Party was a cheerleader for the automation and the relocation and the immigration, and so was the Democratic Party. They had been captured by the big businesses who wanted to replace workers with machines because it was profitable, who wanted to move jobs out of the country because it was profitable, who wanted to hire low-wage immigrants because it was profitable, and who did all that, and who made sure the two political parties whom they funded didn't stand in the way. We cheered on globalization. We cheered on all of the engineers we hyped and to whom we showered praise and money and opportunity. Meanwhile, the conditions of the mass of Americans deteriorated, particularly, again, the white, male, unionized manufacturing workers. Not only them, but mostly them. And they turned to the two political parties and they got nothing. Meanwhile, after long suffering, oppressed groups in the United States, women who were second-class citizens, economically for sure, Black and brown people, ditto, were struggling to have their place in the United States and were making enough noise that the political parties paid some attention to them. Didn't help them a lot, didn't help them very quickly, but helped them a little and with a lot of symbolic. And you know what that does? That freaked out the white, male, unemployed man who began to feel, I'm not worth helping, but these other people are. And when that situation arose, there would always be, in this country as elsewhere, demagogues, political hustlers who saw in this emerging tension an opportunity. Tell the working class that your enemy is those Black and brown people, the women too, the ones getting ahead. They're taking your job. Why would the Republicans and the Democrats, one loudly, one softly, say such things? They would say them because neither of them has the courage to attack the businesses whose profit-maximizing strategy lies behind all of this. Businesses chose to go to China. No one held a gun to their face. Businesses chose to get rid of jobs for technology. No one held a gun to their head. Businesses looked for opportunities to rip off immigrants by paying them less. But it worked. The demagogues arose. In Germany, the demagogue was Adolf Hitler. He told the German people, you got two enemies, the Jews and foreigners. Mr. Trump arose and told us immigrants and foreigners, very similar. He turned the upset, the genuine suffering of white male manufacturing workers against women, blacks, and browns. Easy with American history. Hitler found it easy to turn Germans against foreigners and Jews, too, because that existed for a long time. Anti-Semitism in Germany, as elsewhere in Europe. Notice the similarities. Eventually, the hostility that was initially a way of moving ahead politically, this antipathy to Jews, got so hysterical on the part of these people, like Hitler, that he literally exterminated millions of people in ovens. Mr. Trump isn't there yet, but he has empowered the equivalent of stormtroopers. That's what they were called in Germany. The ice folks, The people who treat immigrants in an unbelievably callous way, faces covered, no ideas, acting as if they have the authority to bully, to hurt, to export, to deport without due process of any kind. That's what Hitler's SS did too. That's what the Gestapo did too. You're caught up in your own ideological craziness, as I have tried to argue here and as many others have. The problems of the American economy have very little to do with immigration. They're too few, they're too poor, they couldn't possibly explain the difficulties of white, male manufacturing workers in this country, any more than Jews had much to do with the crisis of Germany's working class. It takes an extraordinarily, how shall I say, a person with a very ambiguous relationship with the truth to start babbling, to get people's misery to turn them against other people and make them miserable too. We're not at it. We're not yet fascistic, but we have made many of the steps that go in that direction because we have many of the qualities of a difficult economy pushing us that way. And no leaders, no Democrat and no Republican, able or willing to stand up and say what I've been saying. Nothing I'm saying here is secret. Everything is available in the history books. That's where I learned it too. So what are the differences? Here we go. In Germany, the fascists had a real problem, namely the communists and the socialists. Half the country was communist and socialist, and they fought not just at the ballot box, but in the streets too. So things had to go way further to shut that society down. Here in the United States, Mr. Trump doesn't face a well-organized left. The irony of this country is that the left, while it is large in terms of the number of people, think about how many came out on June 14th in 1,500 cities and towns across America. Oh, it's there, but it's not well organized. It doesn't have powerful political parties of its own. It doesn't mobilize to win elections. It doesn't mobilize to get out into the street, except once in a while when things push it far enough, like on June 14th. And why is that? Why was the left well organized in Germany and poorly organized here? Because after World War II, after the Great New Deal, the business community and the right wing in America went to work to destroy the organizations of the American left. One communist, two socialist party, and the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the greatest labor union drive in American history. We never had anything like that before. We've never had one since. All those organizations were destroyed after 1945. Their people arrested, their people hounded out of the country, their people hounded out of their jobs. You called yourself a communist or a socialist, you could kiss your job goodbye, and worse. The CIO represented nearly a third of the American working class. Today it represents a tenth. Everything has been done to break those organizations down. And so we are defenseless against Mr. Trump, aren't we? He doesn't have to yet deploy full fascism. So we don't have it yet. But if you want to see its beginnings, notice that the ICE people seem entitled to have masks so you can't identify them, to deny you their names when you ask for them, to behave in a way we permit no other police to behave. We have a special police. That's what Hitler did too. We're not there yet. but the conditions that brought us to this place are very similar. In the end, Mr. Hitler went so far in exterminating Jews to produce a horror around the world that came back to undo Mr. Hitler. Likewise, his hatred of foreigners led him to believe that the German army could walk across Poland and Russia and Czechoslovakia and all those other places, and he tried, and he was defeated. War and extermination of state scapegoat. Does it sound similar? Are we trying to exterminate our immigrant population? Are we moving in that direction? Have Mr. Trump's spectacular inability to end the war in Ukraine, which he promised to do, to end the war of the Jewish leaders of Israel against the Palestinians in Gaza, that hasn't come to an end. That's gotten worse. Mr. Trump spoke of endless wars. Right. That too was a feature of Mr. Hitler that brought him down. Turned out the extermination of a scapegoat and the attack on foreigners is very fascistic, leads in fascistic directions, but it also points to that which in the end ends fascism. In 1945, Mr. Hitler vanished, either by suicide or in some other way we'll never know. But the German experience with fascism was over. From 1933 to 1945, 12 years. Could have been very different. Has been very different ever since. Will the United States stay on the road it has been on to have yet more similarities to fascism? Not yet, but the analogy takes on more relevance with each passing month. Thank you for your attention. I hope you found this historical parallel type of analysis interesting, thoughtful for you to think about. And as always, I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. As usual, before jumping in, I want to remind you that Charlie Fabian is awaiting your communications if you have ideas, suggestions, criticisms that you want to pass on to us. Just write him at charlie.info438@gmail.com. I also want to remind you that Understanding Capitalism, a new book we released this year, is a kind of companion volume to these programs. If you're interested in what we do here, if you find this valuable, insightful, then remember these are segments that we produce on this program. If you want to go into the same material in some depth, that's the book for you. It's a kind of companion to this program. Okay, today we have a very interesting program. We're going to start by talking about the U.S.-Iran military conflict. Then we're going to have a few words about the remarkable election in the Democratic primary for mayor, the election of Mr. Mamdani, who won that race. We're going to do it in much more detail a week from now, where the whole program will be devoted to that. But a few preliminaries we can already talk to you about. Then the resignation of 2 union leaders from the Democratic National Committee, which is very closely related to the significance of the Mamdani victory in New York. And then finally, a milestone in the economic growth of the BRICS alliance that is now the center of the world economy and the largest bloc, richest bloc in it. In the second half, we will be interviewing 2 members of the orchestra at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City. That is the #1 opera here in the United States and one of the great opera centers of the whole world. It has a spectacularly fine orchestra. I've gone several times myself, and I can tell you it is magical. And these musicians, however, are also members of a union, and a union that is fighting with their management in ways that will affect the future of the opera in New York, the place it occupies in the middle of Lincoln Center, but culture more broadly, because it's a fight about our culture and what its values will be. I think you'll find it remarkably interesting. Okay, let's jump right in. You all know, because it was front page news, that a few weeks ago, the United States sent military airplanes, B-2s, over the country of Iran and dropped some of the largest bombs that exist in the world on 3 different locations in Iran, where the U.S. government said they suspected enrichment of uranium to the point of where it could become a weapon, an atomic bomb in effect. I'm not going to talk about the fact that Iran was not at war with the United States or the United States with it, that this was a completely unilateral decision made by Mr. Trump, who, having promised to end the endless wars, that's his term, not only hasn't ended the one in Ukraine, not only hasn't ended the one in Gaza, but has apparently decided to start another one. I'm not going to talk about those issues around that. I want, however, to draw a lesson from what happened. A couple of days later, the Iranians responded by sending missiles over and damaging an American military base, the largest American military base in the Middle East, which is in the country of Qatar. Here's what I want you to think about with me. If there was a serious risk of nuclear development, of bombing, of enrichment of a uranium beyond what you use for generating electricity, and that which can be so terribly destructive, dropping a massive bomb on such a facility risks what? It risks spreading radioactivity. You're not sure exactly what's down there. That was admitted. Well, if you're not sure, why would you take such a risk? 2 days later, the Iranians sent missiles crashing into and exploding parts of the American military base, where the Iranians would have had to assume there would be nuclear bombs or nuclear missiles stored by the United States, That's what military bases do. Well, here's what's likely the answer to my wondering. Both sides knew that none of that was there. Had Mr. Trump risked releasing radioactivity into the air, he would have been guilty of an incredible war crime. The only thing comparable was the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, and we were at war at that time. Not that that justified it, but we were at war. We were not at war with Iran. So what the heck is going on? We don't know what was at the bottom of the mountains that the United States bombed, and we don't know what was in the base that the Iranians bombed. But here's the most reasonable guess. The United States knew that the stuff wasn't there in Iran, and Iran knew that the nuclear stuff wasn't there in Qatar. So what was all this about? We are now living in a society in which we are kept from knowledge of what is really going on and presented instead with carefully choreographed political theater. That's all we really know. A theatrical one-off strike with bombs that immediately stop and don't resume. And the other side does the same thing in reverse with missiles. And there we are. Neither of them can explain what they were doing in any way that makes sense. And we are left not to know. That was never the intent of the notion of a democratic society. I want to turn next to the Democratic race for mayor that was won by Zoran Mamdani. It is really crucial that people understand what a new milestone has been achieved. A few years ago, a socialist named Bernie Sanders proved that millions of Americans were more than willing to listen to, support, vote for, organize for a socialist. A few years later, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez proved that a dynamic, young, energetic socialist could win and hold support in a corner of New York City. And now we have Mr. Mamdani proving that what Ocasio-Cortez in a part of New York City achieved, he can achieve for the whole city. And which city is it? One of the world's great cities, New York. The United States' #1 city, New York, where a big majority, Mr. Mamdani didn't win by a little, he won by a great deal over the former governor, a regular hack Democratic politician who came in a very distant second. This is a bombshell. This is shaking up all of the political establishment, not just the Democrats, as you can see from the grudging admiration that even several Republicans could not help themselves but show. It is a sign that the times are changing, and changing in big, powerful ways. Millions of New Yorkers are excited by this new opportunity for what was purged out of American politics over the last 70 years, socialism, to show its power the way it has all around the world by showing it can excite and win the support of people here in the United States in a big, powerful way. My next update, and I should mention, next week's program will be entirely devoted to explaining the background, the significance, where the Mamdani administration can take us, deal with it give it the attention that it deserves. My next update has to do with the fact that two union leaders, Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, and Mr. Saunders, Lee Saunders, the head of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. They both sat on the Democratic National Committee, and they both resigned from that committee, as had the young man, David Hogg, who was a survivor of the shooting and began to be a spokesman for the needs of young people to be safe in their schools. Hogg, Weingarten, Saunders, they all said the party is dying. The party is drying up. The party is not appealing to the people it could and should be appealing to. And you know who is appealing to them? Zoran Mamdani. That's the link between these two stories. What the union leaders were complaining about, what they wanted to dramatize by quitting the Democratic National Committee, was then reinforced by Mamdani winning. He shows what kind of Democrat can stunningly win, and win big. They criticize what is a losing proposition, or as David Hogg said, a Democratic National Committee that is asleep at the wheel. My last update that I have time for was news this last week or so ago from the BRICS. That's that alliance I have been talking to you about: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now a dozen other nations with them. They are now the largest economic bloc in the world, much larger than the United States and its big allies, the G7. But here's what the BRICS announced that I want you to think about. They just crossed $1 trillion worth of trade among them. That is, among Russia, China, India, Brazil, and so on. Why is that important? United States strategy in Ukraine was a failure because you didn't understand that Russia could turn and trade with the BRICS after it lost the ability to trade with Europe. And you don't understand why China stands up to Mr. Trump's tariffs unless you understand that China can turn to the BRICS to sell what it can't sell in the United States. Mr. Trump, as I have told you before, his tariffs are serving to isolate the United States, no one else. We've come to the end of the first half. Please stay with us for a really insightful interview with the New York Metropolitan Opera musicians. Before we jump into the second half of today's show, I wanted to thank you for your very generous response to our fundraising efforts this year, and in particular in the last couple of months. And in part responding to that, we are extending the availability of our limited edition, linen-covered, hardcover version of Understanding Capitalism, the book I wrote and that we have been making available now for quite a while. If you are interested, I will be signing copies of that hardcover, and they will be available to you as they have been over the last few weeks. Just simply send an email to us at info@democracyatwork.info and put in the subject line limited edition. We will send you all the information you need to order and receive your copy, signed copy, of Understanding Capitalism in its hardback. And thank you again for your kind attention to the fundraising dimension of what we do. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. I am very proud and glad to bring to our microphones and to our cameras two people I have gotten to know who are musicians on the orchestra of the Metropolitan Opera at Lincoln Center in New York City. The first is Stephanie Mortimer. She's been the principal, and I know I want to pronounce this right, piccoloist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra since 2000. She's chair of the Met Orchestra Committee for the past 3 years. She was a member of the negotiating team for the 2021 collective bargaining agreement and for the orchestra's return to work following the pandemic. During the furlough of that pandemic, she had a grassroots team of volunteer musicians who raised over $1 million, largely through small donations, to help support their colleagues in need and to ensure the Met Orchestra remained a visible and vibrant force in the cultural life of New York City. And before I introduce our second musician guests, I want to underscore that the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra is one of the great orchestras of this country and indeed of the world. Opera is a major phenomenon around the world, more so than in the United States. This is the #1 opera in the United States. So we're talking about one of the great musical assemblages that this country has, and we should think of it as a national treasure. The second guest is Javier Gandara. He has been a member of the Met Opera Orchestra since 1999. He began his professional career at age 16 when he won a position in the Puerto Rico Symphony in San Juan. He later graduated from the Juilliard School and has held positions with several European orchestras as well as the Oregon Symphony. He was elected to the Musicians Union Committee for 6 two-year terms, helping negotiate 3 collective bargaining agreements and a separate media contract with the Met. So I want you all please to welcome these two professional musicians and strong union leaders to our program. Thank you both for giving us your time.
Thank you for
Let me start by asking Javier, if I may, just to tell us what's at issue. I know you are bargaining with the Metropolitan Opera, that you have issues that have been building for some time, and that you are, as a group now, pretty solidly committed to having those issues addressed. Can you give us a quick summary so that other working people and other musicians can have a sense of where you are?
Well, we are seeking parity with groups that are our peers in the rest of the country. But we also, one thing that is fundamental to our struggle is, of course, we want better working conditions and wages that allow us to live in the city that we work in. But we find ourselves also, our struggle is to maintain the quality that has been able to be built over the past, 142 years of the Met's existence. The level of performance that has been able to build over that time, we find that our struggle is to retain, to be able to hire new talent and to retain the quality of the institution.
And how has that been problematized? Why has that become difficult over the recent years and built up to this moment of struggle?
Right. All institutions, I think, have that internal struggle about finances, balancing finances, and artistic quality or artistic direction, right? I think nonprofits especially, maybe, and it's something that you've mentioned in the program before, is that directors of nonprofit institutions have this notion that the people that work in nonprofits should be happy just to work and to do this work. And they're usually not compensating, thinking of the general market, right? So they have this market mentality for everything except for the nonprofit. And that we know is a mistake. And we know that the men in the past and all institutions that want to reach the highest artistic quality, they do know that they have to invest in the people who work there to hire the best people and retain them.
You know, I was struck when I spoke to some of you to prepare for this program to hear about how you, as working people, experienced the pandemic. Could you give me and our audience a sense of what happened and how that was experienced by the Met Orchestra musician?
Yeah, so we were, it was very traumatic. We were furloughed for 18 months with no salary. And it's important to note that this was not a common occurrence in our industry. When we were first furloughed, I think it was thought that all the orchestras would follow suit. But in fact, they all paid their musicians while we went without salary for that entire time. And we haven't received any back pay for any of that. So it was a very destabilizing time. And it was...
Could I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Stephanie, could I interrupt you? Yeah. Besides being thunderstruck to hear such a thing, why didn't the Met avail itself of the federal supports that countless other employers did to help, at least to some extent, get their workers through this period, since the pandemic is in no way, shape, or form the fault of the musician? How in the world did the management there fail to do that?
That's a good question. Actually, the Met, as well as a few other arts institutions, such as Boston Symphony, I believe, were not eligible for those federal monies because they were simply too big. So we didn't get any of that help, unfortunately.
So the worker there, because your employer is big, the worker is... The logic there is... Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted. Go ahead. Give us more of a sense of how that then played out if you've never been compensated since.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were, of course, negotiating the contract for this entire time, trying to get back to work. And it took all of 18 months to do so. During that time, though, we didn't just sit by idly. We actually decided to help ourselves since we were not getting the assistance we needed from our employer. And we were able to, as you mentioned, raise over $1 million in small donations to help our musicians. And this came from our supporters and fans all over the world. That global community really came out to support our orchestra. So even though this was a really, really difficult time, it was actually very unifying for our group. And we still have that solidarity today. And we have just started negotiations, and we know we still have this solidarity within our orchestra. And we are looking to ensure economic stability for the future so that we can have security for our musicians. And we're pretty sure that our group is strong and unified to carry us through our fight.
Give me a rough idea of the relationship between the pay scale at the Met Orchestra and other comparable orchestras around the U.S.
So while we have fallen really far behind the cost of living, that has not happened to our peer orchestras. A 25-year career veteran string player in our orchestra is making a few $100s less than they did in 2011. Where at the same time, the cost of living in New York has skyrocketed. I mean, it's gone up by, I think, over 40%. And so our peer orchestras have not seen that. They are actually keeping up with the cost of living. I mean, the New York Philharmonic just negotiated actually a staggering deal right across the plaza, and other orchestras around the country, and not just our peers. We're seeing gains for smaller orchestras, and we we need to have that same consideration for our group.
Is there any justification? I don't want you to give me the arguments your managers do, but is there any justification that we're going to hear in the press or elsewhere for how and why you have been treated so badly relative? I mean, to get to the level of musician, I know, I played the violin in my life too. You have to spend a whole lifetime practicing and developing. It is a lifelong learning and work to do what you do. How is this? What possible justification could they offer for this?
The justification is usually that they're protecting the institution, that the institution will survive because they're being very conservative in how they're spending money. The problem with that argument is that the institution is not the building, right? During the pandemic, I remember going often and sitting in front of Lincoln Center, which one thing that is I think worth noting is that different cities throughout the country reacted in different ways to the pandemic. In Dallas, for example, the Dallas Symphony performed throughout the pandemic. They had chamber and full orchestra concerts with very few concert goers allowed to come into the theater because of the distancing necessary. And the protocol for testing was incredible that the musicians underwent to be able to perform. But all this was done because the board of directors of that orchestra thought it was important to keep the musicians working and not to stop the cultural life of the city. In New York, everything was shut down. You would sit in front of Lincoln Center, and the New York Philharmonic, the ballet, the Met, it was completely dark, and that was unfortunate that there were not more efforts made to keep some kind of concert series going. We did individually, and one incredibly positive thing that came out of the pandemic was that because the Met Orchestra, we were on our own setting up chamber music concerts throughout the city. One of the things that made it into our contract in 2021 was a permanent, so far, chamber music series, which is a co-production of the Metropolitan Opera and Carnegie Hall. So the musicians of the Met Orchestra have a series of 7 or 8 concerts every year, curated by the musicians of the Met Opera and performed on our day off. So that's either on a Sunday or on a Monday, depending on what our day off is. And we put on those concerts at Carnegie Hall. They've been incredibly successful, sold out. It's good for us because they pay us to do it. And also, artistically, it's important because it keeps our chamber music as another aspect of a musician's life, and it provides that. And also, accompanied by every single one of those concerts is a free concert to be performed that Carnegie Hall schedules throughout the city of New York as part of that series.
You know, I am struck. Allow me to say it. Look what you have just told us, that the management of the so-called important institution couldn't keep it going. But the workers in that institution figured out how to do that.
Right.
You know, it makes you wonder whether the whole way of organizing enterprises in this country, profitable and non-profitable, is upside down. We leave it in the hands of a small group of people whose logic and whose goals are different from that of the men. You wanted to keep working, and the community needed your work. And that wasn't accomplished by the management. It had to be accomplished despite the management.
Right.
Listen, as often happens on this show, we have run out of time. And here's what I would like to propose. If you're willing, once your negotiations are underway, maybe this autumn, if that's still going, we will bring you back and we will have an update conversation on how things have gone for you. And by that time, we'll have an audience that is cheering you on and will want to hear what they hope is the news that your solidarity has paid off.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you, both of you, Javier, Stephanie. I really appreciate your time, and we will look forward forward and be in touch with you about doing this again in the fall.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And to all my audience, as usual, I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. I have a couple of announcements on really big events, particularly one that I want to bring to your attention before we jump into today's substantive program. On the 9th of October, we are sponsoring, and by we I mean the Left Forum, Democracy at Work, and the Economics Department of the John Jay College of the City University of New York. The event is called It's Time for a Big, Beautiful, Basic Change in Our Society. It brings together 4 speakers with distinguished histories that I think you'll want to hear what they have to say at this critical time. Cornel West, Chris Hedges, Laura Flanders, and myself. We want this to be what we know, given our history, it can be. For us, for the organizations, for the institution, and for all of you. So please, if you're interested, make a point. Go to our website, democracyatwork.info, and click on the banner you'll find there, which has all the information you'll need if you would like to participate in this event. Addresses, a panel discussion. It's not more important than anything else we could think of right now to help motivate and direct the national conversation. I also want to remind you one more time of an upcoming book release for the book From the Flag to the Cross, Fascism, American Style, published by OR Books. The launch will happen in New York City, September 24, 6 p.m., Francis Kite Club, East Village, 40 Avenue C. You must RSVP for this event. You can do all of that. Again, go to our website, democracyatwork.info, and click on the banner to do all of these things for either of these 2 events. And finally, you can also visit our website and sign up for our weekly newsletter. That will provide you with details on both these events as well as other upcoming events which we are busily organizing. I think you'll find it interesting, informative, and worthwhile. And by the way, this includes our annual back-to-school discount on several of our books that is running through the end of this month. Thank you. Okay, today we're going to be talking about Vermont public employees who have done something new, I believe, for the first time in American history. What the Tesla board is doing with Elon Musk. What is happening with the Trump administration entering into cozy new relationships with the biggest high-tech corporations in America, something that should concern every person. And finally, we'll be interviewing Joe Berry and Helena Worthen, 2 people who have spent decades organizing what they call contingent labor in the higher education, college and university professors whose fundamental employment situation is captured by the word precarious. They've come a long way, what we used to call adjuncts, and it's important for everyone in America to understand it, and that's what we'll be focused on in the second half of today's show when Joe and Helena will join us. Okay, here's what happened in Vermont that I want everyone to know about. The public employees, many of them, organized in the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employee Unit 93, working together with the Vermont AFL-CIO, has introduced and gotten into a collective bargaining agreement for the next 5 years to give to the workers the right to heed a call. What does that mean? And what is the call? If the call comes to defend democracy by means of a general strike, this provision of the contract allows the workers to take time off without loss of pay to engage in public action to defend democracy. The workers of South Burlington, Vermont, the second largest city in that state, joined 8 other AFSCME units across the state to get this clause in their contract. Multi-day regional actions without loss of pay, these workers can participate in if it's to defend democracy. And you know what president this is the result of right now. I don't think this has happened anywhere else. If I'm wrong, please let me know from everywhere and anywhere. I would like to document the existence of such clauses in union contracts, and I certainly want to congratulate the AFSCME union, the AFL-CIO in Vermont, for the courage to do this, a first in American labor that tells you a lot about what's on the mind of working people in today's America, doesn't it? And when unions are told you should be right up front in the national issues, well, these workers in these unions are doing exactly that. I turn next to an action recently by the board of directors of the Tesla Corporation, a major company producing mostly electric vehicles, as you all, I assume, know. They offered the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, a new pay package over the next 10 years. A pay package worth $1 trillion. Now, to my knowledge, no CEO of any American corporation has ever been offered anything remotely like that gargantuan amount of money. It's kind of odd that the person who is already the highest paid CEO in the United States, or certainly at least the wealthiest one, Mr. Musk, the same person, currently estimated to have, depending on who you pay attention to, somewhere between $300 and $450 billion of personal wealth. In other words, the way capitalism as a system works is to give a board of directors the incentive to give the largest amount of money imaginable to the person who's already the richest person on the planet. It makes the old joke that capitalism is a system that makes the rich richer and the poor poorer sound like a poor joke didn't quite capture the reality, which is funnier, if that's your sense of humor, than the joke. $1 trillion could transform the lives of all Americans, but certainly could go light years towards solving our poverty problems, our central city problems, our housing problems. $1 trillion. My goodness. Every one of you watching or listening to this program could take a pencil on a piece of paper and write down 10 things this country or any country needs that could be helped, gotten in whole or part by $1 trillion. Or to say the same thing another way, you all know 10 things more important to do with $1 trillion than to make the already richest person on earth even richer. You know the word that ought to come into your mind? This is obscene. Poverty has been rising in the United States in recent years. What are we doing with $1 trillion? Making the rich man even richer, and that man to boot? Wow. Imagine a different economic system, not a capitalism, not one that works to have its institutions like corporations take steps like Tesla to make the richest people even richer. It boggles the mind, not just that this happens, but that we live in a society that reads the headline which says it and doesn't know anything other than to turn the page and see what the baseball scores are today. I want to talk to you about a recent set of phenomena that point in a particular direction. Europe fined Google for violating its laws and then reduced the fine down to just $2 or $3 or $4 billion instead of the much higher amount original. That's the power of Google, the lawyers it can hire, the politicians it can, donate to. Wow. Google will earn $205 billion on its ad revenue. The fines it's paying are $2, $3, $4, $5 billion. Tiny percentage. Won't make a difference. Bump in the road for Google. Then I noticed that Mr. Trump had used our tax money to take a 10% position in the Intel corporations, one of the high-tech giants in Silicon Valley, California. 10%, with another 5% the government may choose to buy shares. That means that there's a kind of merger beginning between the highest levels of our government and the highest levels of our corporate oligarchs. They are becoming the same people. If workers strike at Intel, does that mean they're striking the United States government, which will be the most important owner of Intel stock? Will Mr. Trump be tempted to call in the National Guard? Will ICE be given a new job, not just go after immigrants, go after anybody who's threatening the government's share of the big corporations? What was Mr. Trump doing when he cut a deal with NVIDIA and AMD to catch 15% fee for the government from the chips or chip-making machines that those companies sell to China? They got a license to sell to China in exchange for giving the government 15% of whatever sales in China they achieve. There's a name for the merging of the top levels of private corporations and the top levels of a particular political government. In Germany, that's what Hitler did, and it was called Nazism. In Italy, that's what Mr. Mussolini did, and it was called fascism. It breaks down the fence that was supposed to exist between politics and economics. The government is becoming the employer. Republicans are leading the charge. They used to be against things like this. And for us, the people, the merger of the big corporations and the big government make the people oppressing us stronger and more unified, and that ought to worry you, as it should every working man, woman, and child in this country. We've come to the end of the first half of today's show. Stay with me when we talk to Joe and Helena about the organization and the work of the contingent faculty who teach most of our students in most of our universities today. Before we jump into the second half of today's show, I wanted to thank you for your very generous response to our fundraising efforts this year, and in particular in the last couple of months. And in part responding to that, we are extending the availability of our limited edition linen-covered hardcover version of Understanding Capitalism, the book I wrote and that we have been making available now for quite a while. If you are interested, I will be signing copies of that hardcover, and they will be available to you as they have been over the last few weeks. Just simply send an email to us at info@democracyatwork.info and put in the subject line limited edition. We will send you all the information you need to order and receive your copy, signed copy, of Understanding Capitalism in its hardback. And thank you again for your kind attention to the fundraising dimension of what we do. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. I am very glad and pleased, and indeed I'm honored, to bring to our microphones and our cameras two people who've been working on a struggle together much of the time. That is one many of you know about, but that we need to learn more about, as it is undergoing, like so many other things, big changes. They are Joe Berry and Helena Worthen. Joe has been involved in higher education labor movement since the 1980s in many roles, and he's the author of a book back in 2005 called Reclaiming the Ivory Tower, Organizing Adjuncts to Change Higher Education. Then, working with Helena, the two of them together produced a book released in 2021 called Power Despite Precarity, Strategies for the Contingent Faculty Movement in Higher Education. Joe taught history and labor studies at many institutions. Now retired, he is still involved with an important organization, Higher Education Labor United, HELU, DSA, and his own local union, American Federation of Teachers 2121 at City College of San Francisco. Helena Worthen is a writer, novelist, teacher, and union activist. In addition to the co-authored book I just mentioned, she wrote earlier a book called What Did You Learn at Work Today? The Forbidden Lessons of Labor Education. These are people who have tried to work in the field of organizing people whose jobs are precarious, a word that has come to mean much in many fields, but has for a long time been a serious issue in public higher education. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let me begin by asking whichever one of you would like to give us quickly a brief definition. What are contingent faculty? Who are they? Where do they exist? How important is this group in the higher education of the United States?
Well, this is the majority of faculty in the United States. Probably 75% of all people who are doing the work of faculty in higher education are hired on a contingent basis, which means that they don't have any assurance from one semester to the next whether they're going to get a job. And when they are actually doing a job, which means teaching of some sort, they can be tossed out of that job for whatever reason. Some contingents have union contracts that bring a certain degree of protection, but most of them don't. And yet they do a good job. They are for the most part, exactly as qualified as the tenure stream faculty, and they are excellent teachers, and they are important not only because of their number and the impact of their working conditions on the whole experience of higher education in the U.S., but also because their existence, their presence in institutions of higher education has, over the last 30 years, sort of has undercut the power of faculty in higher education and made higher education more vulnerable to the kinds of things we're seeing the Trump administration bringing down.
Yes, let me interject. I've been an academic all my life. I've been a professor in half a dozen universities, and I can personally attest to what you're saying. When I first started teaching many years ago, contingent faculty were a small part of what the department, in my case of economics, had. And over the last 40 years, they became first an important group, then the majority, and now the overwhelming majority of the actual interaction with students, teaching, grading, meeting with the students. It's all done by graduate students and others that are in a very vulnerable, precarious situation. So let me turn, since we started with you, Helena. Joe, tell me a little bit about unions. Have unions been something that the contingent faculty joined? Have they become important? What's the relationship between what Helena just summarized and the union movement?
Well, as far as faculty especially are concerned, we are the people unions were invented for. Many faculty have legal protections of tenure, whether or not they have